We will have orbit... Houston, this is Jupiter 2, apogee in T-minus 30. We will have orbit momentarily. Commencing retroburn. Captain Olivier spoke from his capsule. Solid copy, Jupiter 2. On course at speed. You may commence retroburn at will. Coordinates locked, came the reply from the radio. Captain Olivier looked carefully at his control console and double, triple, and quadruple checked his calculations as the shuttle's slow rumbling and shaking started to lessen. The plexiglass in his view began to demist slowly as the atmosphere began to thin rapidly. Space. The beautiful void began to open itself up to the crew as the shuttle charged through the atmosphere. 70 kilometers, 80, 90. We are out of atmo. Speed at Mach 26, heat shield stable, fuel nominal, Andreas the pilot said as he carefully manipulated the flight controls. Houston, target in sight, distance 223K and holding. Hold for visuals, Captain Olivier said as he began calculating an intercept point. Copy that, Jupiter 2. Press is waiting. Ready to make history? Hell yeah, Houston. Let's just hope the techies were right about it. And all of those guns are inactive, Andreas said, gripping the flight controls a bit tighter. If techs weren't 100% about it, you wouldn't be here, Jupiter 2. There's no need to hope. Can I hope anyway? 200 clicks out, Andreas joked, making note of the distance. We're out of atmo, commencing orbital retroburn. 11 Gs of force. Are you ready for this, Kim? Olivier said, looking back at his female tech lead sitting behind him. What I was trained for, sir. She smiled at him, ever the eager beaver. He smiled back as he double, triple, and then quadruple checked his calculations again, making absolutely sure he had it right. Kim double-checked hers, and Andreas made sure his controls were as responsive as they needed to be. Retroburn in 3, 2, 1, fire! The button was pushed, the engines lit up, and within the space of 20 minutes, 30% of their fuel was gone, and close to 100,000 kilometers of distance was closed. Andreas shouted in excitement as he achieved speeds his old carrier jet could only dream of. Kim closed her eyes and concentrated on kittens and numbers to lessen the impact of the massive acceleration forces being applied to her body. Olivier simply smiled, keeping still and focusing on an imaginary horizon. Target is closing fast, starting rear burn at 20%. ETA, 50 minutes. Olivier said as the radio crackled back to life. Copy that. Metrics are at 108K clicks to target. Tech says burn hard for 184 seconds, then 180 to approach. Should get you there nice and gentle, Houston responded. Andreas used his RCS thrusters to turn the craft around, facing exactly the direction they came from. All 3 crew members had a moment to look at home, the beautiful blue marble sitting peacefully behind them. God, I wish you could see this, Houston. She looks gorgeous, Kim said with elation. Retroburn in 3, 2, 1, fire! The button is pressed. The engines roar to life, and the cabin shudders with 8 Gs of force as the shuttle decelerates. The entire operation is conducted over a period of an hour, as the craft slows to a crawl at 100 meters per second as they approach their target. The shuddering stops as they shut their engines down, engaging close RCS thrusters to control their approach. They are barely 50 kilometers from their target now, and its massive size is becoming increasingly concerning. Okay, Houston, the moment of truth starting the stream now. You gotta see this thing. It's, bigger than expected. Andreas spoke with a tinge of fear in his tone. Hey, that's my line, Kim said, breaking the tension with a "that's what she said" joke, receiving a gale of laughter from the radio in the cockpit. The stream started, and all over the world, nearly 4 billion people managed to see with perfect clarity the massive behemoth starship that had been visiting them for over 2 centuries, just under 2 miles long, just under half a mile wide, and nearly a quarter mile in height. Calculations put the weight displacement at just over 250 million tons, and as the tech crews figured, its massive array of weapons was inactive. For the first time in history since its appearance over 200 years ago, all of mankind had a perfect view of it in crystal clear 1080p. The hull painted a dull military gray, the trim on its edges painted a stark silver, with its weapons and detailing such as antennae and guns in a beautiful gold. Dotted along the hull's surface are the image of presumably the faction logo, colored purple, mixed in with purple streaks and lines to give the ships a more defined look. It appeared on New Year's Eve 1820 for the first time, suddenly appearing in our skies and creating a global mass panic. It then performed the same ritual every 5 years for the next 2 centuries. It would warp into that exact same spot, at the exact same time, every year, 9 a.m. Washington time, New Year's Eve. It would sit there for 7 days, then warp out again. It was always the same ship. But every time it would be seen, it would be slightly larger, or have a new array of weaponry, or be slightly more refined in its design. At first, it sparked panic. The few telescopes on Earth that could see it made a bigger deal about its weapon arrays, sparking a new industrial revolution due to the apparent need for self-defense from an evidently superior foe. It never responded to communications, provocations, or even attacks. It would warp in, sit there, then warp out. As technology progressed, and the warmongers were quietened, a new drive overtook humanity. Weapons development continued, but this time as a means of self-defense. More and more interest developed, using the few photographs and detailed imagery to attempt to reverse engineer or re-engineer visible components of the craft. This led to a second industrial revolution, which led to the information age. By the time it had passed its 100th anniversary, a new space race began where humanity desired to look to the stars. Now fully aware it was more than possible, as evidenced by the city-sized warship wandering around near their homeworld. And now, here we are. On the 200th anniversary, an expeditionary crew is sent to get into it and see what exactly it is or who it belongs to, or even if it's friendly. The world was both excited and tense. If it opened fire, all nations on Earth would immediately take action to try to vaporize it with an ever-expanding arsenal of anti-ship nukes. If it was friendly, every nation was itching to get their hands on the tech. Kim was from Brazil. Andreas was from Britain. Olivier from the U.S. The crew that built the shuttle and launch was a joint operation with almost every nation that could spare either the resources or engineers. Everyone had a stake in the game here, and everyone was both excited and nervous. Okay, starting sweep. We are 5 clicks out. No activity from weapon systems, no signs of hostility. Doing sweep, Olivier said, plotting the course on his computer 3 times to be sure. Using its RCS thrusters, the shuttle began to fly around the massive ship, using a huge array of dozens of cameras to record every single micrometer of the ship's hull. A huge amount of information was being thrown at Earth, and dozens of teams across the planet's surface were frantically receiving, copying, archiving, and decoding it. Olivier painstakingly did this task for over 2 hours, giving the crew more data than they could possibly hope for in one sweep. A close-up shot of the bridge, a close shot of the intricate logo, a perfect camera picture of the side-mounted hangar doors, and a very careful but beautiful photo of the front-mounted cannon array. Military analysts and weapons engineers now have enough work to leave them sleepless for decades. Artists now have sufficient inspiration to keep them busy for centuries. Structural engineers are already at their tables designing better housing blueprints based on the ship's hull. Aeronautics enthusiasts are already imagining themselves in the cockpits of starfighters. High-definition shots of the armor plating are staggeringly beautiful, revealing each and every single armor plate covering the hull had a different pattern etched into it. Other plates had strange, bewildering scorch marks or dents from combat or meteorites that formed intricate patterns. Rarely a few armor plates dotted here and there had pieces of artillery shell or intact railgun slugs embedded into them, and suddenly, the whole world stopped. On a sweep of the starboard side, though scorched and damaged, very clearly written in the English alphabet made out of silver lettering. It was confined to a single armor plate just in front of the bridge, so it wasn't exactly easy to see. The lettering was a bit scorched, but a name could be made out. CIS Reclusiarch's Revenge. This photograph made the entire planet suddenly collapse in a collective gasp. Closer looks around the ship's exterior yielded 3 more of these nameplates. One read, Property of the USSMC. The second read, Manufactured in Juneau Drive Yards, Bay 47, Operations Template 17. The third and final plate was a memorial plaque with a steel tombstone on it. It was mounted directly behind the bridge. The words on it sent shockwaves even greater than those felt by the ship's mere existence at this point. To the memory of the fall of New Eden, 2 billion lives lost. Our vengeance was absolute. This opened up a massive can of worms and fights began to break out. This wasn't alien, it was a human-made warship. Speculation skyrocketed and fights began to break out. The shuttle started its way to the ship's port side, and as they settled in to try to take some photos of the hangar bay, it opened. "Houston! Houston! Portside hangar bay is opening up!" Andreas yelled up. "Keep away from it, Jupiter 2! We don't know what that thing can do!" Too late. Olivier spoke up and comms shut off as a docking arm appeared from the hangar bay doors, grabbing the shuttle and dragging it inside. The shuttle rocked and shuddered, everyone terrified of their situation as the world was rocked with despair. Comms shut off and the shuttle was dragged into the hangar bay. The hangar bay was very well lit, the interior paint job a bright white. Yellow and black hazard stripes marked parking bays for drones, the hangar capable of holding 2 large commercial aircraft. Dozens of what appeared to be atmospheric or spaceborne fighter craft lined the hangar bay, ready for deployment. The hangar door closed, and the shuttle was slowly lowered to the floor. The noise in the cockpit slowly leveled out, the soft huma of the shuttle interior gradually being replaced by the mechanical grind of the larger ship's internal operations. "What the actual fuck, Cap? I didn't sign up for this," Andreas said, as he struggled with the controls. There wasn't anything he could do. The shuttle's RC system had flamed out and refused to start. "We are dead in the void, sir. We're locked out of our systems. Every command I give is being blocked. I think this ship has just hacked our entire system," Kim said, as she tried desperately to counter the attack on her system. She frustratingly slammed her hands down on her keypad. "Damn it! I'm completely locked out!" The shuttle's doors released and opened. The seatbelts came loose and a clear holographic path opened up leading to a door in the ship's hangar. A voice, a clearly English voice, spoke up from the ship's AI. "Pressurization is complete. Please proceed to debriefing." The crew were bewildered, befuddled. The voice repeated again with emphasis. "Please proceed to debriefing. Follow the marked path, please." Following the order they were asked, with no other real choice, the crew left their seats and followed the marked path. The air was fully breathable, so there was no need for much else. Olivier grabbed his weapon, a small .45 caliber sidearm, and kept it close. The trio made their way through the ship, entering a long tunnel. "Entering pilot core. Please hold for debriefing." The voice spoke as they entered a large room, dominated by a pod-like object in its center. "What in God's name is this place?" Kim said as she tried to use her wearable computer to catalog it. The trio approached the large egg-shaped pod in the middle of the room and wondered what to do. A series of mechanical clangs and grinding gears started, filling the room with a low rumbling noise. The pod moved up, its casing opened up and revealed a shocking sight. A human, male, very heavily augmented with pipes and cables coming from every point in his body, his face covered with an ornate, handcrafted mask. Every time he breathed or spoke, a jumble of bubbles appeared. The human in the pod regarded each member of the crew with a glance. "Took you long enough to get up here. We were expecting a lot more." "Who are you?" Andreas asked. "It's been 200 years since I have needed to care. My call sign is Rikusiark. Therefore, that's my name." "What the fuck is going on?" Olivier asked, keeping his sidearm at the ready. "There is no need to be rude." Rikusiark glared at Olivier. "A history lesson, perhaps?" The lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared around the trio of adventurers. "You say it's the year 2020. It's not. It's the year 2320. 2029, a breakthrough in commercial spaceflight led to a mass exodus of Earth. Mars, Callisto, Jupiter, hell, even Pluto became colonies. Then people like me showed up. Corsairs." The hologram showed the images of various points in history. Had everything they knew been wrong? Was everything they did for nothing? A Corsair is a human that has undergone a complete biocybernetic replacement of all components. A device known as a synaptic link is installed, and the pilot is engaged into a ship. The devices and tech allowed us to directly control a ship of any size as easily as we would control our own bodies. Thoughts become actions. Actions translate into ships the size of cities. Volunteers began to appear from every part of every colony we had. The hologram changed to show the events unfolding, giving a good idea as to the sacrifices necessary to undergo the process. But the results spoke for themselves, allowing for a single individual to control a warship the size of Manhattan. Corsairs took off in every direction. By the end of the century, tens of thousands of us were out in the void, accomplishing who knows what, doing whatever they want. The governments of the world, greedy as always, decided to do what politicians always do. They tried to control us. The Seoul Civil War started. The hologram showed short snippets of half-hearted political speeches and mindless ramblings about too much freedom with too little accountability. Various images of riots erupting in colonies, Corsair pilots being illegally arrested, followed by a Corsair fleet suddenly appearing, wiping out a federal blockade fleet with no losses. The government declared war. The Corsairs hijacked the shipyards and fleet assets that gave them their lives and vanished from the system. 6 months after the Exodus, we had first contact with aliens, an empire that simply immediately attacked us. New Eden was shattered, 2 billion lives erased. We attempted negotiations. They responded with violence. We surrendered. They massacred or enslaved us. They found Earth. And although the Federals put up a valiant defense, they were no match. The aliens were ready to shatter Earth before the Corsairs warped in and engaged. The hologram showed a short movie of all the events described. A planet being shattered in half. Warships of human design being melted into slag by powerful laser weapons. The alien fleet arriving at Seoul, dismantling a fleet of warships that engaged, destroying shipyards and factories on all colonies, killing billions. Finally, the alien fleet arrived in orbit of Earth, only to have the flagship suddenly vaporized. Our revenge was merciless, absolute. The Corsairs, limited only by imagination, returned home with a thunderous roar of revenge, rage, and hatred. Unchallenged by regulations or rules, they vastly outmatched the aliens. They chased them out, wiped their fleet out completely, then began a devastating rampage. Blinded by rage, they cut a devastating swathe of death and destruction through the galaxy, scouring it clean of life. By the time they returned from their crusade, the damage done to Mother Earth was sufficient to render us back to the medieval age. The hologram showed a montage of merciless destruction as dozens of fleets were vaporized by overwhelming force. Hundreds of planets were scarred clean of life or simply shattered out of rage. 60 years of history passed by as the hologram showed Corsairs scouring the galaxy clean of all sentient life. The hologram showed Corsairs returning in mass numbers near Earth's orbit, only to be greeted with a species that they took too long to save, a world regressing back to the age of muskets and castle walls. Blinded by rage, we forgot where we came from. Now we all wait in silent vigil above the remains of the tombs we created, hoping that those we left behind will forgive us for what we did. We do not regret our attacks against the enemy. We regret not coming home to help. The hologram stopped and the lights got bright again. The room remained quiet for a good 10 minutes while people took in the information they just heard. 300 years of human history was lost. All the time it was up here. So, what now? Andreas asked, still dumbfounded. A small mechanical arm appeared out of the floor holding a device of some kind. Take this hard drive. Go home. Think, deliberate, consider. We will be waiting for you to reclaim your place in the void.
I was only 12 when the Earth died. I am one of the few left who can still remember a childhood on native soil, breathing unfiltered atmosphere and feeling the soft pitter-patter of rain on bare skin. I am of a dying breed. They call us grounders because we were born planet-side, on hallowed soil, instead of the sterile zero-G environment in our colony ships. To the rest, we are relics of an era long past, when humanity still had a world to call its home. It will forever be in our memories, our birthplace, our cradle, and our cause for vengeance. Scientifically, the destruction of our world was simple. The aviacs, as we call them, detonated the core, splitting the planet into countless fragments of rapidly cooling molten rock and crust, easily harvestable by their machines. The aftermath was not so easy to describe. On that day, we lost everything. I lost everyone I knew. Our race lost its knowledge, its people, its culture, and its homeland. Only 20,000 of us survived, given a second chance by the pity of another passing species. These were whom alien enthusiasts called the Greys. Extraterrestrials who had been monitoring our planet since ancient times. They had come too late to prevent our world's destruction, but were able to rescue as many as they could find. They told us what we needed to know, fed us, sheltered us, and served as our mentors. For that we are forever indebted to them. But now we have become a race bent on revenge. For the crime of genocide on a scale of billions, there is a blood price that must be paid. The Greys made mention of another planet, much like our old one, where we could settle down and be far away from danger. On it, we could rebuild our civilization in peace and forget about the Aviacs. Many of us went to settle this world, which we named Nova Terra in memory, to start anew. But there were those of us who still remembered Earth and still remember what was done to us, and we thirsted for vengeance. We were weak, however, and few in number. The Greys had provided whatever help they could in arms, technology, and advice. But they too were inferior to the Aviacs, so we had to improvise. We would steal our enemy's technology and reverse engineer it to our own need. This was our ultimate advantage, the ability to adapt whatever we came across. In a way, we were a virus, using their own weaponry and machinery against them. This is the reason I am sitting in an assault frigate 2,000 kilometers away from an Aviac cruiser, hidden among the debris of an asteroid belt. To construct our own fleet, we must have the schematics to their FTL engines and navigation systems. I am part of the Espatiers, the only trained military force that humanity currently fields. Even so, we are not acknowledged officially as such, but instead as pirates and outlaws. There is no reprieve if we are caught. No exchange of prisoners, summary trial and execution is about the best one can hope for. But we are driven by the same thoughts of revenge, retribution, and vengeance. That is why we volunteer. I strap the belt across my chest tightly. Each of us in the pod is armored with an exoskeleton, built from stolen blueprints, improved by human ingenuity. Our weapons, human-crafted but Aviac-engineered, are specifically designed to destroy our opposition as swiftly as possible. This is our goal: to be launched at the enemy, to board their vessel, to take no prisoners, and retrieve whatever we can find. Rinse and repeat. One day we will have a fleet and men to crew them, and we will have our revenge. For now, we kill. We are aimed at the heart of the enemy vessel, the better to puncture its vital systems and sow disruption among its crew. Our team is only one of several, structured to knock out communications and defensive capabilities before the enemy can react in preparation for the resulting slaughter. The squad leader gives the green light to the gunner, and he calculates the correct firing trajectory. A slight deviation and we may sail far past into open space, an easy target for shipboard weapons. There is a jolt as we are launched from the frigate, one metal object on a collision course with another at 3,000 miles an hour. All that stands between us and being splattered like an organic pancake are the inertial dampeners, also adapted from alien design. We cross the distance between the two ships in the blink of an eye, far too fast for the Aviacs to react. There is another jolt as we impact against its starboard bow, punching a hole through the titanium hull. I pull the bolt back on my weapon as the blast doors slide open, ready to disgorge the pod's contents into the inner environment of the enemy ship. Fortunately for us, the Aviac homeworld has a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, meaning there is no need for rebreather systems. The temperature is a little on the warm side, since the Aviacs cannot easily generate their own heat and grow sluggish in the cold. We have known this for some time and specifically target their environmental systems to hamper their combat effectiveness. In my off time, I have heard news that Nova Terra has flourished greatly in the time since its founding. Its exact location is a highly guarded secret, and there are many who have gone to their grave, willingly or not, refusing to divulge its coordinates. However, there are also reports of colony ships heading out to terraform nearby planets, all abundant in resources, especially those needed for war. There is talk of building shipyards and a navy, and best of all, preparing for action against those who wronged us. Fortune willing, I shall be crewing the first human ships to see action among the stars and the first to launch the salvos of our ascendancy to power. Our footsteps echo down the steel corridors as we hurry towards the captain's quarters. We intend to reach it before the enemy can destroy anything of value, as they are wont to do when the battle is lost. Each of us is educated in the enemy's language, and we know the letters for mess hall when we see them. The squad leader places his ear against the door as the rest of us stack up behind him. He waves his hand horizontally in front of his face, making chopping motions and holding out 3 fingers. Enemy contact, resistance light, move in on me, he communicates wordlessly. The charge he places on the door blows it off its hinges after 3 unbearably long seconds. In the smoke and the confusion we charge in, guns held fixed against our shoulders. We have caught them at mealtime. They look at us with understandable confusion as we open fire, bullets ripping and shredding their flesh. When the leader signals for us to stop, there are 26 bodies lying on the floor, all very much dead. There is a sudden motion and one of the aviaks, who had previously been hiding behind a counter, bolts for the exit. 2 of us put him down before he makes it halfway across. Few humans have ever seen an aviak in person. There are pictures, of course, and holoreels demonizing them, but the truth of the matter is that they are much less imposing than the media makes them out to be. Physically, they are weak. Avian in nature, their bones are hollow and their feathered bodies usually spindly and light. They cannot stand a variety of environments and are severely hampered by any change in condition. In unarmed combat, a human will win, provided he is fit. This has been proven many a time. Their intelligence is a different story, but I have yet to meet one who can outsmart a bullet. We move on, passing by the crew quarters where another squad is at work, hosing down the area with gunfire and grenades. It is likely we will hear exaggerated tales of their exploits much later in the canteen. Up the staircase we go, on our way to the bridge. In aviak ships, the captain's quarters are directly located next to it. We pass by what seem like propaganda posters, urging the crew to fight for their brood mothers and strive to make their hatchlings proud. There has been a great debate about the aviak culture among our leading sociologists. What sort of race must these beings be if they could destroy another species without warning just to harvest resources? The prevailing belief is that survival of the fittest is the general rule of thumb. If they can take it, they will. Even amongst themselves, they will fight, cheat, and steal anything, including food, land, and mates. For instance, captured aviaks have been known to turn on their cellmates with little persuasion, just for better treatment and food. A good amount of our intelligence and perspective on their race is obtained through this method. Their society is structured in a harem system, with one male heading flocks of females and doling them out to associates or allies as he pleased. It was a system quite alien to us, but we could understand why they committed the actions they did. In their minds, might made right, and our inability to defend ourselves was tantamount to an invitation for destruction. In my mind, it was a game 2 of us could play. As we entered the bridge, we could see that these aviaks were a little more prepared than the flock downstairs. For one, there were more of them than us. 2, they were armed. Our ability to use weapons was limited by the fact there were delicate instruments we did not want destroyed, at least not until we had finished with our business here. I have said before the aviak were physically weak. Here was an example in action. Judging by my count, they must have outnumbered us at least 3 to 1. The fight was one-sided when it began. It ended as a massacre. Their choice of weapons were often plasma or laser-based, whereas ours were kinetic penetrator slugs. Our armor was specifically designed to render their arms useless, dissipating the incoming bolt's energy over a body-wide network of capacitors. I saw one raise his rifle at me, fire once, twice, and then I was upon him, powered fist catching him underneath the chin. The exoskeleton we wore multiplied our strength so that we were able to lift heavy machines with a single hand and sprint while carrying hundreds of pounds. My uppercut broke his neck clean through and he flopped lifelessly backwards. I scrambled over the console behind him and threw myself into the emerging melee. A quick survey of the fight's aftermath illustrated my earlier point. The casualties on the enemy's side were total, while our only injury was from an overeager private ramming himself and the aviak he had in a headlock into a solid steel bulkhead. The squad leader quickly split us up, directing some to retrieve navigational data, others to download tactical information, and assigning me to retrieve the captain's files. I found the room off to the side, labeled in the strange pictographs that passed for their language. This was another point of puzzlement among our scientists, that an intelligent species could evolve linguistically without switching to an alphabet, much as if pre-millennia Chinese had become the dominant language of Earth. It made for an unwieldy system of communication as well as data interfacing. Most of all, it became a pain to translate and adapt their technologies to our own operating systems. With rifle in hand, I slid open the door to claim our spoils of war. There was an older aviak, the graying feathers was an indication, inside, unarmed and wearing what passed for a dress uniform. He squawked at me, "Who are you? How dare you attack us?" Have you any idea who we represent? Earlier, I had made the point that few humans had seen a real aviac. Likewise, few aviacs had ever seen a human. It made sense. After all, since we had simply been a momentary obstacle in their territorial expansion. Complicate that with the fact our power armor consisted of full-face shields, we remained an enigma to survivors, however few there were, of our attacks. The Aviac Naval Command had suspicions that the raids on their ships were human in origin, but definite proof was lacking. Against regulations and better judgment, I removed my helmet so he could better see his executioner and watch carefully for his reaction. Upon catching sight of my features, he went white with fear above the beak, muttering, "No, that's impossible." Instantly, my heart grew heavy with rage. He knew what I was. He knew what his people had done to mine and had been complicit in their sins. Their blood was on his hands now. I advanced menacingly, directing him against the wall with my rifle. "Mercy!" he pleaded, noting my stance. "Broodmother's eggs, have mercy!" I thought of my father, my mother, my sister, and the billions I had never known but lost. I thought of the world I had taken for granted but would never see again. I thought of my life, stolen away from me and never returned, and deep down inside, I knew there could be no mercy, that there was only vengeance, hated, and a debt that needed to be repaid. Every one of us, soldiers, civilians, and humans, would strive for the elimination of our enemies so we could be safe. That was total war. The irreconcilable fact that we would not permit ourselves to lose, that every one of us we would fight to the last for the right to exist. We were a race on the brink of annihilation at war. I looked at him with great fury and anger, so he would know to tell the devil to expect many more of his kind on the way, and pulled the trigger. Back on the ship, we tallied the results of our expedition. 2 casualties, one from enemy fire, the other from overzealous exertion. We would find replacements in the next few days, for there were always men and women eager to sign up for the Espatier. The Aviacs had already seen to that. We had retrieved valuable information, shipping manifests, convoy routes, and most treasured of all, blueprints to a FTL drive. With it, we could eventually build a fleet to match theirs. Our little incident would not go unnoticed, however. The patrols normally canvassing this route would find a derelict husk floating through space, all hands aboard dead with curiously distinct signs of violence. They would know it was us and demand answers in the Galactic Senate. Our ambassadors, handpicked for the express purpose of appeasing the Aviacs, would forcefully deny any links to humanity in general, dismissing our work as that of pirates and outlaws. We would neither be honored nor recognized for our service, not until a free humanity exists, likely long after my lifetime. With dissemination and lies, we will keep our enemies unsuspecting and overconfident. They will think us weak, and we shall give them no reason otherwise. Meanwhile, the Greys have offered to let us build shipyards at Epsilon Eridani, where, using the knowledge we have and will have acquired, we can churn out warships of any number and train the personnel to crew them. Already there are plans for a great flagship, the pinnacle of human and alien technology, to serve as a base for the Espatier Corps. Christened the Prometheus, few would remember the origins of her name, but for every man or woman who worked to keep the great arc of humanity afloat, she would be a representation of their collective efforts. In time, humanity will have to fight, whether we are prepared for it or not. But those who oppose us will find that behind the ready words and easy smiles of our ambassadors are countless men like me and innumerable ships like the Prometheus, machines made for war. Tremble, enemies of man, for Earth and her children behold you, and we find you wanting. Taken from the memoirs of Sergeant A. Wallenberg, Blood and Thunder, an account of the Espatier Corps in the Aviac Human War.
We till Skyrim's ground, despite frozen toil.
We tended the Quama beneath Morrowing soil.
We hunted the Wamasu in black marshes glades. We green hearts had no need for blades. Then they
ravaged our lands.
Akaviri brought nothing but bloodshed and lies.
Our families were slain before our eyes.
With three separate people they shared a cujo.
A choice between death or war.
But then our three people knew what must be done.
To end the oppression of
Three became one, forged by war. The Evan hearts rose and drove the Akaviri back to the sea. When the enemies begged for the mercy they lacked, three voices as one shouted blood for the pact.
Forged by war, our story we told.
our shackles hold us where the moon stole for gold.
We tilled Skyrim's ground, despite frozen toil.
We tended the Quama beneath Morrowind soil.
We hunted the Wamasu in black marshes glades. We three hearts had no need for blades. Then they came from the seas, full steel in their hands. They burned down our homes
And ravaged our lands.
Akaviri brought nothing but bloodshed and lies.
Our families were slain before our eyes.
With three separate people they shared a cujo.
A choice between death or war.
But then our three people knew what must be done.
To end the oppression of
Three became one, forged by war. The Evan hearts rose and drove the Akaviri back to the sea. When the enemies begged for the mercy they lacked, three voices as one shouted blood for the pact.
Forged by war, our story we told.
our shackles hold us where the moon stole for gold.
We tilled Skyrim's ground, despite frozen toil.
We tended the Quama beneath Morrowind soil.
We hunted the Wamasu in black marshes glades. We three hearts had no need for blades. Then they came from the seas, full with steel in their hands. They burned down our homes
And ravaged our lands.
Akaviri brought nothing but bloodshed and lies.
Our families were slain before our eyes.
With three separate people they shared a cujo.
A choice between death or war.
But then our three people knew what must be done.
To end the oppression of
Three became one, forged by war. The Evan hearts rose and drove the Akaviri back to the sea. When the enemies begged for the mercy they lacked, three voices as one shouted blood for the pact.
our story be told.
No shackles hold us, weapon and stone or gold.
We tilled Skyrim's ground, despite flaws and toil.
We tended the Quama beneath Morrowind's soil.
We hunted the Wamasu in black marshes glades. We green hearts had no need for blades. Then they came from the seas, full with steel in their hands. They burned down our homes
And ravaged our lands.
Akaviri brought nothing but bloodshed and lies.
Our families were slain before our eyes.
With three separate people, they shared a cruel joke.
A choice between death or gold.
But then our three people knew what must be done.
To end the oppression of
Three became one, forged by war. The Ebon hearts rose and drove the Akaviri back to the sea. When the enemies begged for the mercy they lacked, three voices as one shouted blood for the pact.
Forged by war, our story be told.
no shackles hold us, weapon and stone or gold.
The arena seethed with anticipation as the cryopod was wheeled in and set gently on the sand. The operator, a four-legged creature with a tentacled face, used his face appendages to activate the defrosting sequence and release its occupant. Primitive technology? He scoffed to himself as the pod began its sequence. Welcome back to the grand arena, my fellow podlings. We have a grand fight for you today, as we finally encountered a new species. A loud, booming voice yelled out through the open amphitheater. The crowd cheered in awe. It had been centuries since a new victim was added to the lists. Recently discovered by the Council, these creatures known as humans have only just started leaving their local sectors. This poor bastard was found along our southern border because his ship reactor exploded. The crowd let out a jubilant laugh as the cryopod went through its last few cycles. Owing to how stupid this thing is, it's either going to be an entertaining fight or it's going to be a silly scream fest. Imagine losing your ship because you can't fit a ship reactor properly. Another jubilant laugh from the crowd as the gate at the end of the arena cranked open. But enough of our future victim. Hungry for the blood of a new race, pleased to welcome one and all Thargeter the Decimator. The crowd screeched in elation and excitement as a massive, ape-like creature with 4 arms, clad in heavy armor and holding a large flail weapon, walked through the door, raising his arms high to the cheer of the crowd. The creature is 8 feet tall and built like a tank. His footsteps rock the stadium with every stomp. The cryopod opens up and a human exits. The human is 7 feet tall, clad in heavy ceramic armor, and looks around, measuring his surroundings. The crowd's jubilation seems somewhat reduced as the newcomer looks around. People better see what he is and what he's wearing. His ceramic armor is painted a bright blue, has various numbers and insignias on it, and clearly it's more than just a primitive. He looks around, realizing that he is under attack as Thargeter the Decimator approaches him with a heady laugh. Podlings of the Grand Arena, the challenger has awoken! Let the massacre begin! The announcer blasts his final message and the crowd cheers. The human reaches into his cryopod and fetches his weapon, a long, straight, two-handed blade that's almost as big as he is, then regards his new opponent carefully. Thargeter charges at the human soldier with a mighty roar, and his thunderous footsteps echo through the grand arena. The soldier moves with unimaginable speed as he effortlessly dodges Thargoder's attack, then sweeps his blade around. The blade slices clean through Thargoder's legs, cutting them clean off. Thargoder is unable to scream or react as the blade is almost instantly brought down on his neck, severing his head clean from his shoulders before his torso hits the ground. The soldier immediately charges towards the open gate that tries vainly to close before he can do anything. The gates close too slowly. The soldier's blade cuts through several Rakani security officers' claws and armor plating before he begins ravaging through the arena's interior concourse. His mighty blade slices clean through almost anything. Heads, legs, armor, torsos, carapaces, and chitin of every species imaginable is cut clean open before the soldier comes across the riot response team. A row of 30 men with charge rifles, railguns, and plasma rifles now carefully guard the entrance to the arena's spaceport. The soldier throws a small cylindrical metal object. A blinding flash followed by a mind-meltingly loud noise that outright disables or kills several guards due to sensory overload follows as the object detonates. The guards are instantly slaughtered. The soldier collects a weapon, tossing some to the side and checking each one, using each one to kill a single target, before settling on a pulse rifle and a railgun. The new weapons cut a devastating swathe through the arena's employees. The human charges and slaughters his way through the area, heading towards the spaceport's docking bays when he stops momentarily to read a sign. He uses a few side glances to kill a cargo ship pilot leaving his ship and continues reading the sign. Seeing he is distracted, 3 Kalandi soldiers appear and charge him. He raises a pistol and kills all 3 with one shot each without ever taking his eyes off the sign he is reading. He lets out a roar of rage and charges back into the arena, slaughtering more officers and riot soldiers in a hail of gunfire. His accuracy is perfect, always hitting the perfect shot at exactly the right moment. Any shot he can't make, he simply pulls out a blade and cuts whoever is in his way or outright beats his target with his armored fists. He finally finishes his massacre and encounters the slave pits, cages, and secure locations where slaves are kept for later use either in combat or entertainment. The slave master who is set to guard the arena is grabbed by the head and lifted several feet in the air as his head is crushed. The soldier goes through each cage, either ripping the doors off their hinges or forcibly removing each slave from his or her chains by shooting, cutting, or physically breaking them. He then rallies each slave, barking orders and corralling them towards the spaceport, killing 50 or so more soldiers. The cargo ship whose pilot he killed earlier is still there on the docking pad. The human soldier quickly ushers each slave into the cargo ship. 74 slaves are secured, and the soldier starts the transport up, then charges towards the nearest hyperlane exit point. The event is over within less than 20 minutes. The fleet nearby is too slow to respond, and the cargo ship successfully leaves the star system. The council looked at the security footage, and all winced in pain, fear, and disgust as they watched a human soldier cut a merciless swath through a Dakatharian fighting arena. The human counselor stood to attention with a sinister smile as he let the images play out, only speaking once the security footage finally stopped. "So, what exactly are we here for?" the human counselor said with that all-too-sinister smile. You are here to face formal charges by the Dakathani Imperium for humanity's attack on one of their colonies. The lion-like Catharnus counselor spoke up, finding his courage again. "You mean the charges that were laid after they got their asses completely beaten in half by the soldier they kidnapped after they sabotaged one of our warships? Oh yes, now I remember. Those charges." The human counselor snapped his fingers, and as if on cue, 10 more soldiers, just like those seen in the security footage, walked in the room behind him. The council gasped in terror, no longer believing the security footage to be a work of fiction. The Dakathani counselors were the next to speak. "What heresy have you created human?" "Oh, the brainless warriors actually speak? Well, since you asked so nicely, these are called legionnaires, a cross between a Spartan and a space marine," he said simply, gesturing to the soldiers surrounding him. "Why would you make such creatures?" one counselor said, seemingly out of breath. "Well, Games Workshop kept suing us for copyright so we couldn't make Space Marines. 343 and Bungie kept threatening to sue us so we couldn't make a Spartan. So we made a combination of both. Then we threatened to pull their operating licenses if they tried to sue us again. Needless to say, they stopped trying to sue us after a few stockholders went missing, the human said with a sly smirk. That clearly wasn't the answer the council was looking for. Oh, you mean morally? Well, I don't know. In human land, slavery is illegal, immoral, unacceptable, punishable by execution. You have slaves. Why can't we have super soldiers? You don't have any right to tell me what is good or evil here. As far as I'm concerned, and my opinion is all that matters here, what you do in those colonies with those arenas is the worst thing you can possibly do. The council regarded each other momentarily. Before they could do anything, the human counselor spoke up again. Therefore, I hereby propose the following changes to galactic law. The human counselor pushed a series of buttons on his keypad, showing images to the council. The images were a series of photographs with the homeworlds of various worst offenders in the background, with the angrily helmeted forms of thousands of legionnaires in the foreground. The human counselor continued. I hereby propose that kidnapping and slavery now be illegal, punishable by death. To all who would vote no, I would like you to consider if you would. That devastation was caused by one legionnaire. I wonder what would happen to your homeworlds if I unleashed thousands of them. I'm sure one way or another you will see our point of view. The human counselor smiled at the, and all too familiar, sinister, sadistic smile, and waited to give the order either to attack or to retreat. The counselors regarded each other with apprehension as the legionnaires now in the room began to ready their weapons. Emperor Galvar walked through the dimly lit hallway towards the secluded room that the two aliens were escorting him to. Looking around, he couldn't hide his distaste, his mandibles flaring and trembling uncontrollably. The metallic clang that his talons made with each step he took only added to the knowledge that he was inside the construct of an alien mind. The trio arrived at their destination in mere moments, and the metallic, colorless doors opened to reveal a table, 2 chairs, one for him and the other manufactured to support the strange anatomy of his peoples. He shook his head, refusing to acknowledge them as such, even if the reality and the sole reason he was there was to achieve the same goal. Tiredly, he made his way to his chair and sat on it. Idly, he watched with his 4 eyes that on the table laid a piece of parchment. His mandibles flexed and felt as if one of his hearts skipped a beat as he remembered what that piece of paper contained. The Emperor didn't wait for long for the doors to open again. Looking at the female, the woman, if he recalled correctly, he couldn't help but examine her for a moment. Unlike the vast majority of other humans he had seen and dealt with, she wasn't wearing any form of power armor, conventional armor, exoskeleton, or even carried a weapon on her. The uniform she wore spoke not of military might, but one more dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge or laws. Emperor Galvar, the woman spoke with gentle barking noises, the translator all but plucking the sounds her mouth made and transforming them to his language. You must be Ambassador Talina, Galvar said, bowing his head in the customary sign of greeting for his people. Talina returned the gesture and approached the table with a slow, cautious pace. I am. I hope your transport was accommodating? Galvar tried, but failed to look away as he replied. It was. Your aesthetic decor, however, leaves much to be desired. This is a military vessel, Emperor Galvar. In other circumstances, we would be having this meeting on a diplomatic ship. Alas, that is not the case. Reaching the table, she sat on her chair and leaned forth, resting her elbows against its hard, cold surface. Do you wish for some refreshments? I'd rather do what I've come to do and leave, if you don't mind, Ambassador, Galvar replied, his mandibles flaring and his tucked wings threatening to unfold themselves. Are you quite sure about that, Emperor? She asked in a serious, deep tone. Do you know what will happen once you sign that treaty? He felt his stomach's churn and twist inside his thorax. Nearly chittering, he replied, I wouldn't be here otherwise. I've read what that document contains enough times to have it memorized. Yes, human, I know what will happen. Talina sighed. Let me rephrase my question then, Emperor. Do you understand what will happen? Galvar closed his eyes and his body trembled. I've read and seen your history. What you did, what you've done, what your species has achieved. He opened his eyes. I know what you did to the Borshai. The Borshai? Talina whispered the name in barely contained contempt. May I tell you a little story, Emperor? Why? It won't change my decision to sign the treaty, he replied. Because I'm afraid you need to know a bit more about humanity than what the info package could ever tell, she insisted. What more is there to learn? You slaughtered the Borshai, did you not? Galvar said, feeling his exoskeleton shudder for not the first time in his life. Indeed we did, she admitted. Several seconds passed until the Emperor gave her a soft nod. When we, humanity that is, reached for the stars, finally breaking away from the confines of our solar system, we did so expecting to be received as monsters, primitives, barbarians, or as little more than another competitor on the galactic stage. She paused for a moment, musing her words carefully. You see, when we developed the hyperdrive, we did so not as a unified species. Science fiction, epic stories, all kinds of possible scenarios had been conjured by our writers, artists, and more about what meeting alien life would be like. Frankly, it was impossible to prepare for every single option presented to us. What do you mean? Galvar asked, having never heard of such information before. The package your admiral delivered never touched on that. Only some of your history, your conflicts, and some of your highest and lowest achievements. We would have followed the usual path of approach, but our current situation could hardly be called usual, don't you think, Emperor? Talina chuckled, and Galvar simply remained silent. Rushed improvisation aside, there were several frightening scenarios placed before us. Could we be the first intelligent species in the cosmos? Could we be the only one? What if the universe ended after cracking FTL travel? Would we meet a ravenous, mindless hive mind? Would we stumble across a galactic union of sorts? Would there be war as our first contact? She chuckled. Just to name a few? Galvar was stunned and baffled. What species could ever dream up so many outcomes upon reaching the stars beyond? Apparently, humans could and did. However, the most popular belief was that if we were to meet intelligent alien life as advanced or more so than us, then surely concepts like gods, religions, faith, and make-believe would have been expunged from their society, throwing it aside, discarding it as useless in favor of embracing logic, science, and development. What? Galvar chittered, unable to believe what he had just heard. Talina smiled somberly. We really thought that we would be seen as primitives or treated as the laughingstock of the galaxy should we encounter the aforementioned galactic union? She used her fingers to make quotation symbols in the air. Galvar couldn't say anything, so he just stared at the human across the table, surprised that the translator system in the room was advanced enough to relay what her gesture meant. Imagine our surprise when first we discovered the stellar forum of civilizations, and second, when we discovered that religion wasn't something to be laughed at, but the norm and staple of every sapient species. Why would your people ever think that? He asked, confused. It was a good thing he was already sitting, for the revelation would have surely made his legs tremble at the sheer absurdity of that notion. Many reasons, but once we began to speak with the few species that actually bothered to respond to us, we realized a few things. We thought the galactic community would be thriving, not be just a sorry excuse to keep a record of those civilizations that achieved FTL and made contact with the Forum. There was no Senate, no primordials, no precursors, not even a centralized empire, she said, shaking her head in disappointment. Knowing that most civilizations kept to themselves, except for those that were relatively close to one another, was a rather hard pill to swallow. Of course, not all civilizations make contact with the Forum, and equally true, the thought that every single civilization practiced religion in one shape or form was something we were not expecting. Then, 5 years later, as we began to expand and our territory now could be counted to possess 70 systems, the Borshai made contact with us. Galvar felt his entire body stiffen at the tone the ambassador used. For someone who was not part of the military, he could feel her aggression through her voice. No, not aggression. It was something more, something deeper. Anger, disgust, hate. I read what they did to your people, Ambassador, he said softly. No words I utter can say I understand your feelings. Talina took a deep, calming breath. We lost 5 billion people, Emperor. 5 billion. 8% of our entire population in under 3 Terran months. And why? The Borshine religion was based on purity and war. They saw us as impure and thus decided to attack us without warning, without provocation. By the time our fleets could mobilize, they destroyed the stations, mining outposts, every vessel that couldn't flee, and the colonies on a third of our territory. We stopped them before they could breach into the more developed systems, thankfully, and then we began to push back. Galvar couldn't say anything. There was nothing he could say after hearing that. The teachings of his once unshakable faith told him nothing, but the pain he could see reflected on the oddly expressive face of the human told him enough. There was still something he couldn't understand. How could you unify against the Borshai? Your pre-FTL history is a litany of carnage, death, suffering, betrayal, and bloodshed. Millions, billions died on your planet due to internal wars and conflicts between different nations. How could you, as a species, manage to survive for so long and thrive? Because the only thing that humanity knows how to do better than tear itself apart is band together for a singular purpose. And the Borshai gave us that purpose, she sighed. As we studied them and interrogated the prisoners, we found out why exactly they saw us as impure. The reason? Our religions. She stopped for a moment, standing up and giving the Emperor her back. Every species out there has either one religion or a dominant one with 2 or 3 minor ones that aren't all too different from the main one. Watching her turn around to face him, Galvar could only stare into her 2 green eyes as she continued. We humans have dozens of them, some major ones, some minor, always shifting, always changing, some even adopted alien religions. She chuckled. The Borshai hated us because to them, we were little more than animals that couldn't decide what faith to embrace and follow. Because of that, we were impure and they attacked, declaring a holy war of extermination against us. Letting us exist would allow us to infect the purity of their faith, or some nonsense like that. So your solution was to drive them back and exterminate them wholesale, move a dozen asteroids to destroy their homeworld and bombard their colonies? Galvar asked. Why didn't you offer them a chance to live and change their ways? Talina blinked. We tried, but they were zealots. I'm sorry, but the translator didn't recognize that word, he said. They were religious fanatics of the worst kind, each and every single one of them. We tried to offer them terms of surrender up until the very last moment we could still change the trajectory of the asteroids. They refused every time. We didn't have to bombard several of their colonies because after news of what happened to their homeworld reached them, mass suicide acts followed. They blew space stations themselves and scuttled their ships just to remain pure. Galvar closed his eyes, processing the new information he had been given. It's funny how religion works or is perceived by other species. The Folhum treats science as a religion. The Verg's religion is based around commerce, wealth, and profit. The Kaljukt's religion is something to what we call atheism. There are no gods, higher powers, or anything like that. We simply are, and this is the only life there is. Ironic, is it not? Galvar failed to see the irony or humor in her words when it came to the hedonistic Kaljukt, living their lives isolated from everyone else and indulging in all of the excesses of life. Putting those thoughts aside, he opened his eyes. You didn't answer my question, Ambassador. They attacked us, Emperor, without provocation or any cause outside their own religious beliefs, she replied angrily, though not directed at the sapient sitting across the table. An eye for an eye only makes the whole world blind is a popular saying amongst many of my people's religions. It is also a stupid belief, in my opinion. But you're an ambassador, he protested. How can you, a woman of law, peace, and order, say such things? It is precisely because I am an ambassador that I can say that, Emperor. They killed 5 billion of our people, so in turn, we should have killed 5 billion of theirs to call it even? No. We were not going to do something so stupid as to give them a chance to muster their forces and strike at us again. We gave them a chance to surrender. They didn't take it, so we killed them all. Humanity has not known the threat of the Borshai ever since. Every child, man, woman, son, daughter, father, mother, and family they butchered without mercy was thoroughly avenged. And your wanton genocide was what sparked the Naowi to declare war on you, yes? Quite so. But unlike the Borshi, the Naowi were reasonable and accepted surrender when it was clear they couldn't win. Now they are our allies. After that, some species came to us asking for aid, not just militarily, mind you, whilst others tried to prove their mettle against us. Humanity has come a long way in only 30 Terran years, Emperor. And some time ago we stumbled across you, the Otski and the Zerkake. Yes, he said weakly, still remembering the day human ships arrived at their home system and took positions on the homeworld's orbit, guns ever at the ready. I envy your people, Emperor Galvar, Talina said suddenly before retaking her seat. He watched her face intently, trying to find any indication of treachery or deception, but found nothing but sincerity. Why would you envy us, Ambassador? Are you perhaps trying to mock me, my faith, and my people? I would never dare to do such a thing, Emperor. I envy your faith, your conviction, she confessed. I ask again, Emperor, do you understand what will happen when you sign that treaty? I want this war to be over, Ambassador. I will carry the burden of the atrocity I'm about to commit proudly if it means the salvation of my people, the Emperor replied, leaning forth to press one of his 3 fingers against the parchment. Can you promise you'll try your best to end the conflict quickly and avoid further needless bloodshed? I can promise you we will try our best, Emperor. Talina leaned against her chair. But I'm afraid the Zerkake don't look like the kind to accept surrender easily. They remind me of the Borshai in some aspects, in fact, she said grimly. We will bring an end to it, Emperor, that I can promise you with all my heart, she smiled. Your religion, your beliefs represent the best humanity wishes to achieve. Peace, prosperity, love, understanding. You refused to fight back, refused to be broken, and when we offered our help, you denied us because of what would happen to your enemies. Thank you for making this sacrifice to save your people, Emperor Galvar. He nodded once, grateful for her words, but knowing how condemned he was for making this decision. After what I've seen them do to my people, he shook his head. Then he looked down at the piece of paper. So be it. With that said, he grabbed the quill set aside for him to use and signed the treaty. Reading the last paragraph, he hoped with all his strength that he was doing the correct thing for his people. The signatories of this treaty validate the entry of the nation known as Enkindlers of Light into the Sacrosanct Terran Union as a full protectorate. The Sacrosanct Terran Union shall aid and defend the Enkindlers of Light from any threat. May the end of this war come swiftly.
My sergeant barked orders at us as we desperately held the line. The 6-legged swarm approached us. I held my plasma rifle in my hands, barely holding on to it as I was shaking too much. I carefully peered over the edge of the barricade we had set up, and my heart started racing again as I saw the mountain of enemies approaching. Small insectoids, the biters as we called them, by the thousands. Sure, our artillery could kill swaths of them in one go, but there were always thousands more. They all scurried along the ground, plasma bolts impacting into groups of them. For every 10 we killed, 50 more would take their place. They moved as one group, scurrying across the ground in waves of scaly, scuttering flesh. Plasma rifles discharged heated bolts toward scurrying groups, killing dozens with one detonation. "Keep at it, brothers! I got word we got reinforcements!" Our sergeant barked at us, followed by a mild cheer of enthusiasm from the men. "Praetorian!" One guy screamed as one of the larger blade-appendaged creatures suddenly appeared. It charged at us, using the smaller scuttering creatures as a shield. The few plasma bolts we were able to get thrown in its direction did little more than kill a few hundred scurrying swarmers. This is how lines always fell. The swarms would force us to overheat our plasma pistols or laser rifles with a charge from the smaller ones. The bigger ones would use this to crawl closer to the line, then charge at us with the swarm. Plasma weapons wouldn't fire fast enough, so we would simply retreat, let the line fall, and hope. I stood up, aimed my weapon, and fired. It did nothing to the beast as it charged our battle line. We heard that the position was failing. We had to evacuate. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't do anything except aim my weapon and shoot. Within minutes, we would all be dead, either from the artillery strike needed to cleanse this position, or from the Praetorian who would carve us up and feed us to the swarm. I looked dead into its eyes, and suddenly, a firestorm of explosions, loud cracks, and multiple shots. I watched, almost as if the world was in slow motion, as 1,000 projectiles flew through the air, shredding through both the swarmlings and the Praetorian. A few of these projectiles simply cracked the creature's armor. Others deflected off its kitten as they passed through the smaller swarmlings. The sheer volume of these projectiles ensured the Praetorian died quickly. The rest of the swarmlings died quickly as well. A few larger, bulkier projectiles thrown into the mass of chitin and legs exploding with enough force to render hundreds at a time into mulch. We snapped back to our senses as an aircraft burst into view, hastily pulling up and barely coming 50 feet off the ground at high speed. It had insignias we never saw before, guns we never saw before, engines we never saw before. It flew less like a craft and more like a bird of prey. We watched in sheer amazement as 10 more flew into view, diving to the ground, unleashing a storm of metal into a swarm, followed by a mass of dozens of chemical rockets. Within minutes, a battle that had lasted nearly 2 months was over. We watched the craft overhead go beyond the battle line and slaughter a legion of the swarm. So busy watching the display of mass death, we failed to notice our reinforcements had arrived. A loud crack of thunder in extremely close proximity, followed by a Praetorian's head exploding, directed us to the small form of the new creature, the short ones. None of us had seen it before. The trench we were in was now covered in them. One, standing there with his long rifle, taking precise shots at distances too far to be real and scoring a kill on nearly every shot. 2 more were near some kind of mounted weapon, one holding a belt of vicious-looking projectiles, the other manning the gun itself. 3 more standing atop a ruined wall, holding atop their shoulders some kind of big tube device. They were half our size. 2 legs, 2 arms, 5 fingers as opposed to our 4. Their faces were flat, stubby, 2 eyes with a variety of colors and skin tones. The uniforms are covered in segmented armor plating like a strange, hardened ceramic. Some wore special goggles on their faces, covering their eyes. I could see some kind of words and information displayed on it. We stood bewildered at the sudden appearance of a clearly military-focused, highly advanced species suddenly appearing and saving our lives. One of them stood in front of me and snapped his fingers in front of my face to call my attention. He made some gestures with his tiny hands. He pointed to his rifle, a strange black metal machine that had a belt of some kind loaded with ammunition. He made a gesture that said something like small, then pointed to my plasma rifle and made a gesture that means big. I stood still considering what was going on. My keen eye then spotted the craft from before retreating, followed by a massive dust cloud on the horizon. The creature in front of me, a short one, as we called them, repeated his series of motions. I suddenly got the idea. Our plasma weapons against the Praetorians and Centurions. The big ones. And their guns against the swarmlings. I pointed at my plasma rifle, then pointed at the shattered corpse of the Praetorian nearby. Then I pointed at the gun in his hand, then pointed at the body of a swarmling nearby. He titled his head down and up in a nod, his face contorting into what was clearly a smile. I whistled loudly, snapping my trench line out of its dumbfounded stupor. "Reform the line!" Within seconds, my brethren had reformed their stations, weapons at the ready. "Focus fire on large targets only! Let the short ones handle the swarms!" I bellowed loudly. I readied my rifle. The short ones in the trench line readied their weapons with a series of mechanical clicks. We readied our weapons, the sound of powering up power cells filling the air. The short one in front of me made more gestures with his hands. He pointed at the craft flying overhead, pointed at his timepiece on his arm, then made a gesture that indicated the numbers 1 and 7. He did it again, slower and clearer so I could properly register it. I looked at the ticking clock. The time scale he used was roughly the same as ours. "The aircraft will rearm! Time to response is 17 Vintus! Hold the line!" I barked loudly at the trench line. My sergeants and captains had finally regained their composure. Before long they had caught on to the strategy and began barking orders into our radios, spreading the news to the trench line. The swarm apparently got in range of the trench line, and a loud noise of cannon fire descended onto the valley. The short ones in front of me opened fire with prejudice, and it appeared as though a river of metal suddenly appeared into the sky. I could see thousands of swarmlings, big and small, suddenly drop dead or falter their advance as a hail of ammunition tore off limbs. The humans holding the tubes yelled something, looking behind them. They then fired, a loud thud noise signifying they had fired, followed by the projectiles they launched, exploding directly into the face of a swarm. Hundreds of the swarm died instantly, pieces of chitinous monster scattered in every direction. Some pieces of chitin had shattered at speed, incapacitating more enemies in the sheer shrapnel. The short ones holding the larger guns occasionally fire, taking any opportunity to hit a Praetorian they can actually see. Some actually score decent hits. The swarm charges us with force. Despite the unending storm of metal, there are still tens of thousands to consider. But here, we notice something. Clearly the short ones did too. Every time one of them kills a Praetorian with a good shot, they yell out something. The others notice, redirect their fire. A Praetorian is killed. The swarm falls back. We hadn't noticed this behavior before. Normally they would be right on top of us, so we couldn't really tell if it happened. One Praetorian gets closer than the others, and we get in range. Our plasma rifles fire a focused volley at it. It gets hit, disintegrates into a puddle of discombobulated goo. The swarm he was leading retreats. A new pattern emerges. The sergeants know this, the short ones know this. The word travels quickly, and before long, we implemented a strategy we only now had the chance to do. For the first time in 600 years of war, the tide was turning. We were told to hold the line, and hold the line we did. The swarm never stopped, and neither did we. The aircraft swooped in and wiped out the nest. The hive mind severed. The swarm began to disintegrate. The swarmlings stopped dead in their tracks as the connection severed, either going insane, screeching with rage or pain, and either waiting around before dying or slaughtering each other. The few Praetorians and Centurions left alive were dealt a fast death blow by the short ones. The first hive mind link killed in over 480 years. The planet was saved. We rejoiced. The short ones were somewhat surprised at our sudden victory vocalizations. War chants and jumps for joy startled them as the swarm died off. The short ones apparently weren't done, or they knew something we didn't. Most of them moved forward and walked into the mass of chitinous bodies, putting a few rounds into any remaining squirmers. The short one from before, plus a few others, stayed behind, keeping guard as we celebrated our first victory in centuries. The very same short one approached me and pushed a button on his helmet. He spoke in Saranai. It was broken, somewhat childish, but it was at least coherent enough we could speak. "Understand me? Me talk. You hear?" he said, his translator very clearly only just starting to function. "Yes, I do. Who are you?" I asked. "Corporal Withers. Army. Human," he replied, pointing to himself. Well, he said more than that, but like I explained, the translation software wasn't all that good yet. Probably wasn't more than a few weeks old, to be honest. He reached a hand out to me. Mine was twice as big as his. I took it and he shook it, just like we did. Our celebration was cut short by the arrival of more war machines these humans used. Pallets of supplies, both medical and martial, arrived in force. We had no time to celebrate. We had work to do. It finally happened. 6 months after that first battle, we were winning. A stalemate that lasted 1,000 years, finally broken. The Horde was being driven back at long last, all because of them. It's not to say the humans did not endure grievous casualties, just like us, but it was because of them we actually had victories, real victories, victories that allowed us to take lost planets back. Before humanity arrived, the only victories we had, we would think them to be hollow. We could easily secure space. The Horde ships were almost worthless against our weaponry. But when it came to ground combat, we would always be pushed back. Their numbers were superior to our tech. Plasma rifles and Gauss cannons can only go so far when you have 3 targets, and you can only kill 1. Human weaponry turned the tide. The sheer volume of fire coming from their primitive weapons culled the Horde to its barest minimum. When we were finally able to communicate face-to-face via translator systems, or with us simply learning our languages, that was when it really turned. The humans would focus their firestorm of ballistic and kinetic weapons against the vast numbers of the Horde. We would hold our fire and focus on the bigger targets. It was a strategy that worked beautifully. and within a short time we had taken back one of our colony worlds. The Horde had no other motivation than to feed and to breed. It was just a horde, nothing more. We had been fighting it for over 1,000 years. Hollow victories of us destroying hive fleets in space with ease, only to realize we missed maybe 1 or 2 spore pods. A desperate fight for survival, ending either in evacuation and retreat while we watch the world be consumed, or retreat to better pastures while we leave the colony to fight for itself. Hollow victories of either evacuating an entire world while millions die on the front lines to hold back the tide for just a few minutes longer. Families going onto transports watching their fathers and sons die in a battle they couldn't win. Or watching the faces of the few on the ground sink to despair as the fleet disappeared in the skies. The tide turned and we fought harder than ever before. Humans landed on a colony world about to be invaded. 600 men stood alone against the unending tide, just to guard a few stragglers that failed to evacuate in time. Their sacrifice inspired us to make our first real push into Horde territory. And within a year, with massive casualties, we managed to take back a colony world we lost decades prior. Humanity was somewhat dismayed at our staggering losses, and from that point forward insisted we fight alongside them. The Horde has millions of planets, infested countless worlds, but we will, with the help of our new friends, we will wipe them out.
Chief Navigator Felik's brow lowered as his eyes contracted, focusing his annoyance on the scanner in front of him. A chitinous limb exposed itself from the folds of his ceremonial robes, and a single digit unfurled. He rubbed at the dark smudge on the screen. It stubbornly remained. They had patrolled the Elithrak system, named for the commander of their flagship, the Retellis, for 7 days now. They had seen it all, and the disappointment of these meager planets had reached all the way back to the homeworld. Initial dossiers had sent a jolt through their entire species, an inherently stable system with a rich asteroid belt and 3 planets in the right place for all Commonwealth species. It would have been invaluable for the war effort if the 3 planets weren't all nightmarish wastelands. Elithrak 2 was a planet-sized pressure cooker. The probes they had sent down had lasted minutes. 4 was a dry, airless world bearing the scars of relentless asteroid bombardment. And 3 was a hostile combination of both. Positive news was circulating about a few of the system's moons, but Felik wasn't impressed. The Commonwealth needed a hub, a manufacturing epicenter for the system. The current swath of backwater colonies was simply not enough. "So why are we still here?" asked ETC from behind, as Felik almost jumped out of his carapace. Yeathsea, the leader of the ship's strike team, was good at sneaking up on people. "Mossy," Felik said. No more was needed. Simple enough. Elithrak's briefing had the detail, but that's what it boils down to. Search and destroy. "Well, I can't say that tactics failed me," replied Yeathsea, spreading his mandibles in a grin. "Hey," Yeathsea said suddenly. "What's that on your scanner?" "A mark," Felik said dismissively. "I'll procure some cleaning. It's moving." "Commander on the bridge!" shouted Yeathsea as he and the other soldiers snapped to attention. Alithrak emerged into the room, and he was just as imposing as the Mhasi whispered. His sinewy frame reached 8 feet easily, despite his hunch, and his gaunt face held eyes of fierce intelligence. "What have we got?" he asked as his subordinates scrambled to comply. "A large object over Elithrak 2, Commander, in a very low but stable orbit," said Felik, "and it's a dead read across the board. We only spotted it against the bright clouds of the planet," said another. "How large?" Elithrak inquired. "Just under 11 kilometers end to end." "Which seems ordinary for a small natural satellite to me, Commander." "What my colleague is failing to take into account is the shape, sir," said Felik. "And what shape is it?" "It is, well..." The first analyst trailed off. "Ship-shaped." Elithrak nodded slowly, considering the situation. "Notify all ships. The Sivoran is to take point for a clean scan, whilst the Fexus and the Doem plot firing solutions." The bridge erupted in the clacking of keys and mandibles as orders were issued and followed. Alithrak turned to leave, pausing briefly by the door. "Captain Yeathsea, make your preparations." "Absolutely, sir." 3, 2, 1, firing. Probe fired. Silence loomed over the bridge of the Ratellis as glowing rear of the probe flashed briefly into view. It vanished into the void, but the tracking locator remained to give a steady reads of distance and speed. The fleet was observing from behind the third planet, spread into a tenuous skirmish formation. Watching it with particular interest was Captain ITC and his strike team from a small monitor in the armory. If the probe was successful, then they could well be the follow-up. 15! 10 kilometers! 5! Impact! ITC had his eyes closed as he imagined the probe coming in like a kinetic round. The flash of raw heat on impact and the immense shudder which would ring through an entire ship. The spray of debris into space and the red-hot hole in the side. Impact confirmed! Breach? Asked Elithrak urgently. The probe's handler hesitated. Did we breach? Affirmative. We're in. Probe is damaged, but we have a signal. Display on main. The bridge darkened as a rotating icon appeared cheerfully against the window. Gravimeter on, said the handler as a messy stream of data occupied the top left corner of the projection. Thermals on, was the confirmation as the second quarter came online. Some white patches from the impact, but otherwise solid gray. No heat. GPR on. Blurry schematics started to appear in slices in the third quarter. Visual on. As the fourth panel came online, Elithrak craned to see, stretching to his full height of over 9 feet. His subordinates didn't even notice him, so drawn were they to the monitor. In the armory, an auto rifle fall freely to the ground, and nobody even blinked. What are they? How many are there? Are they alive? Endless questions were cast from every corner of Elithrak's fleet, as the same image from the probe was held in every mind. The picture had already been smuggled off of the military network and onto the Commonwealth net. It had already been recognized as a hoax, as the apocalypse, and as everything in between by the so-called experts back home. Elithrak stared at the same image in his quarters, in endless awe. There were pods, hundreds of thousands them in a vast cylindrical chamber, with as many as 8 such chambers mapped out on the GPR scan. In the foreground, every detail was visible on a single pod, including, most importantly, a nude gray figure suspended in a stagnant fluid. Elithrak couldn't gauge its size from this perspective, but he already had a team of scientists studying the images. He was fascinated by the mane of thick fur at the top of the otherwise hairless creature. It had the musculature of a young Mahasi, but its skin was pale and dotted with black and silver sockets. Elithrak had made up his mind. He left his quarters and strode straight into the armory, garnering a reflexive salute from a surprised ITC. Soldiers of the Ratelli Strike Force, you will soon be launched through space, through someone's hull and into history. You are tasked with recovering a specimen from the ship, and if the entire species is not dead, you will be the conduit for our ambassadors to establish first contact. You mean, sir, that even if they are alive, we should still secure the specimen? Correct, Captain Yathc. We will have an alien to study, whether dead or alive. 10 minutes to prepare. Breaching. Breach confirmed, came the satisfied call of the lead gunner on board the Ratellis. His ordnance this time was jokingly referred to as live ammo. An assault shuttle bearing 2 teams of Commonwealth Special Forces. Approximately 2 kilometers away from the target, a charge in the midsection would detonate, accelerating an exploding nose to make a breach as the rear half followed through with the troops. Captain ITC, this is Ratellis Control. Do you read? We read you. Deployment successful. We've established a perimeter. Nothing unexpected so far. He's good, said Elithrak, brimming with confidence. ITC and his 2 teams had deployed into a large room which, their GPR schematic showed, was just above another large chamber. Air, heat, and gravity were all offline, but their combat suits could handle that. YTC could hear his troops over open microphones, and nothing else but the rhythmic clunking of his magnetic footsteps reverberating through the suit. Team 1 front and center, he barked as he gestured towards a door. I want this open. With a grunt of confirmation, 2 troops moved forwards as others covered the door. One drew a breaching plate and clamped it to the front of his rifle as another scanned the door with a handheld device. Right here, said the one with the scanner, tapping the middle of the door as his colleague raised his weapon and pushed the breaching plate against it. Breaching, came the call as the locking mechanism exploded into the next room. YTC was already in with a crowbar, and the door was quickly opened. They descended a short set of stairs and were confronted with another door. This one, however, seemed to read their intent and opened itself in silence. "Control," announced ETH. "Looks like bits of this thing still have power. Just how old is it?" "The science team is working on that, Captain. Current best guess is a couple thousand years at least. Control, be honest with me here. Do we have any idea who built this?" asked ETH. "Negative, Captain. But given the size of this thing, we're hoping that they're dead or friendly." "Dead or friendly," said ETH under his breath. The team relaxed a little as they moved through the next few rooms. The inside of the alien ship was a complete mess, but they didn't see any signs of battle. Eventually, they found a large round opening which they knew would lead into the pod array. They walked through in a wedge formation and emerged in the cylindrical chamber onto a catwalk that spanned the entire length of it. The individual pods were larger than the images had suggested, and ETH walked up to one of them, as if hypnotized. An alien floated in the pod before him, just like the one in the image. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. I was hoping for something more interesting, cracked one of his troops. "Ugly fuckers, though," replied another. ETH seemed satisfied with the specimen in front of him. "Control," he called in. "Please ask Commander Alethrak if this particular alien would be sufficient." "One moment, please." The squad's technician stepped forward, casually removing the front panel of the pod's console. He poked around inside with a little light. "Shit," he said. "This whole damn system is... well, it's alien." "You can't hack it?" Short answer, no. Long answer, I'd love to get this back to the Retellis and try. Let's see, said the technician as he started experimenting with the keyboard. An interface flickered into life, presenting a menu in the alien language. "Just one option, so I'm guessing that's release. Let's find out." With a quiet whir, the console burst into activity, throwing up alien text as beeps and whirs came through. A speaker behind them made a cheerful ding as the large round exit slammed shut. Atmosphere began to rush back into the chamber, thick yet colorless. Less oxygen than would be considered optimal in the Commonwealth, but perfectly breathable. "Captain, this is Control. What the hell is going on down there?" I think we turned it on." Lights were coming on everywhere, and the vibrations of heavy machinery could be felt through the catwalk. An alarm sounded within the alien pod, and the dirty, viscous fluid was drained in seconds. It cracked open, globs of liquid floating through the massive chamber. "Quick, before the gravity comes on!" yelled Ethak. "Control, we have the alien. I think it's alive. We need a pressurized route out of here." "No pressure to any of the adjacent rooms, Captain. Wait, the LZ is above you. Go up." "Gimme that!" shouted ETH as he snatched an anti-tank weapon from the leader of Team 2. He aimed upwards and fired, blasting a large hole through the ceiling. "Mag boots off, let's go!" With 2 of them clutching the alien, they jumped in unison, emerging not far from their landing zone. Clambering aboard the shuttle, the team strapped in and sealed the door. "Form a damn line! Medics, engineers, scientists, everybody else. In that order, you grubs!" The clamor surrounding the shuttle back on board the Retellis was intense as personnel surrounded the returning raiders. "I don't know what you did down there," yelled Alethrak as he strode towards ETH, "but it's active and I am hoping that it's not pissed off." "Commander," said one of the analysts feebly. "Not now," replied Alethrak as he turned his attention back to ETH. "Captain, I've got 15,000 crewmen in this fleet here cleaning shit out their robes because you turned something on. You got any idea how loud I had to shout to stop those assholes on the Fexus from putting holes in it?" "Yes," said ETH. "Commander," tried the analyst again, "did you get the damn specimen at least?" "Yeah, we did." A stretcher emerged from the assault shuttle bearing the unconscious alien. This stunned the crowd into silence. Everyone except one determined analyst. "Commander, look at this," the analyst demanded quietly, passing a data pad with the now famous pod image on it. "Yeah, the pods. Welcome to 3 hours ago. Now get..." "Yes, the pods," replied the analyst patiently. "Look." Alethrak did look, and when he saw it, it was like a slap in the face. This was not the original image. This was the probe's live feed. The same room from the same angle, with the same countless pods, except that they were empty. Within minutes, the alien was situated in the laboratory, with a horde of scientists taking samples. The rest of the crew were scrambling for their battle stations as their potential target, the behemoth alien ship, poured incredible force from its engines and broke the gravity well of the second planet as if it were a paper chain. "Incoming broadcast, text only," shouted the communications officer above the chaos. With a nod from a Lithrak, the message was brought up on several screens. It was a short one. "They seem to have guessed the structure of our language and have provided suggestions for us regarding translation." "Good. That's good, right?" queried Felix. "If they wanted to destroy us, then they wouldn't care if we read it or not, right?" "How long to translate?" asked Alithrak. "Not long. They've done most of it for us. They must have been monitoring Captain ETC's communications. The first word reads, 'Attention interlopers.'" "Not a good start," said Felix. "Power to weapon capacitors," commanded Alithrak. "Right, it reads, 'Attention interlopers. Earth stands today as a withered husk of what it should be. We were judged and found wanting by forces far beyond us, but there was survival amidst the destruction. There was learning amongst the chaos, and finally, from within anger and hatred and fear, came retribution. Earth stands today as a monument to our survival, for there is far less remaining of their homeworld. We do not care that ours is a dead world. It is ours by rights, and we shall hold it. We do not care that we are a doomed species. We shall survive and learn against the malevolence of all others and of the universe itself. The human remnant marches forward with not one left behind. Incoming! Alithrak's first reaction was one of relief. Had their main gun fired then, they wouldn't have had any notice. "What have we got?" His question was answered by a resounding wham as something slammed into the side of the Retellis. The Fexus had opened fire at the first human capacitor surge, and the Doem had now joined it. The two heavy cruisers were moving to shield their flagship as an array of destroyers and corvettes fanned out. These would form a missile shield for the larger vessels with their point defense systems, and in turn they would soon launch missiles of their own. "Slug, charge, what the fuck just hit us?" "Minimal damage, sir," said the chief engineer, apparently surprised. "It slowed rapidly just before impact." "Wait," started Ethc, still in his combat suit. "It's a fucking assault! Surge! Incoming!" Warning screamed urgently as a small, silent flash came from the human ship. The battle icon of the Fexus winked out. "Are we hit?" "The Fexus!" Crewmen swarmed to the view screen to see the front of the Fexus burning. The fireball mushroomed from the front of the ship as the atmosphere inside combusted. The human slug had torn an opening along the vessel's length. Survivors would remain in outer armories and hangars, but the ship was lost. Alithrak had been stunned into silence. "We need to fall back," yelled Felix. "There's another problem," countered Ithc. "Intruders in the main hangar." "Stop them," ordered Alithrak to Ithc, his control over this situation draining with every second. With a muffled ding, the door opened. Ithc moved through. With him was the 12-man strike team he had taken aboard the human ship. Another 200 soldiers had armed up and would soon move in through the main door. The corner of the hangar was twisted and charred, with the open nose of a human assault pod poking through. It was far larger than the covert shuttles used by the Commonwealth, and so too were its occupants. 4 humans had already disgorged from the pod and taken position in the hangar. They looked very different to the specimen Ethc had retrieved. Gone was the flesh and hair, and instead stood a gray mountain of armor and equipment. Although silent, the towering figures had their attention focused on just one of their number. Officer. Ethc raised his weapon, took aim, and fired. He watched in dismay as the round plinked against the human's head and failed to penetrate. It turned. "Get down!" yelled Ethc as one of the humans stepped forwards, holding a multi-barreled weapon from the hip. It spun to life as Ethc hit the deck, and then it loosed a long burst of pure hell towards the Commonwealth squad. Exploding rounds hammered into the Team 2 leader as his mutilated body collapsed. Another burst forced Ithc and his men to duck and run, returning only a few shots as they retreated to the door. The 4 humans advanced, pouring suppressive fire into Ithc's position. 2 humans flanked rapidly, standing between Ithc's squad and the main hangar doors as the other 2 continued to suppress. 2 more of the Commonwealth soldiers were shot at close range, and Ethc heard them expire over the open microphones. Just in time, his reinforcements arrived as the main hangar doors whirred open to reveal 2 companies of ground troops. The first 2 humans, now themselves outflanked, simply turned and fired. "Commander, We've lost contact with Captain Yetha C. Have his reinforcements arrived? They arrived at the hangar, and we seem to have lost contact with them, too. We have 4 alien signatures moving towards the science wing. 4? Where are the rest of them? We don't know. Lock it down, lock everything down. Have the Betka send us more ground troops. Use a fucking assault shuttle if we have to. We need to stop those intruders. The next 10 minutes passed in near silence, save for the steady pings of computers tracking the exchange of fire in space. The dome had fallen back after taking a glancing hit, and soon after the human vessel had stopped firing its main weapon. It was now plugging casually at the smaller vessels with its secondary guns, and had yet to score a serious hit. Sir, they've breached the science wing and are converging on the alien. Is the science team alive? Yes, apparently they ran and the humans neither fired nor pursued. His enemy honored surrender, or at least recognized civilians. The silver lining on a particularly gruesome cloud, thought Alethrak. Do we have working cameras in the science wing? Displaying on main. 4 figures, armored and invincible, stood around the naked alien. One put down a huge case it had been carrying on its back as 2 others used some sort of scanner on the alien. It stirred. From inside the case came another armored suit, with the boarding party helping the 5th human get dressed. The leader of the human assault team then turned to look straight at the ceiling camera. For a second, Alithrak doubted that the viewing was one way. Incoming broadcast from inside our ship. It's audio. It was spoken crudely in Commonwealth, but they recognized it instantly as it filled the bridge. Not one left behind. Human ship designs are eccentric. You don't really believe the humans could do that, do you? Ixcabod declared, his mandibles clattering. Klaxrug slowly groomed an iridescent wing, her segmented eyes shifting to a sorrow blue hue. Saw it myself while I was attendant to Hive Queen Claraxa 3 cycles ago. We visited the human hive world Loam. Arid place. That 3rd planet. 2nd planet now that their sun devoured the 1st. But an entire Atroxian armada? Surely you jest. The 2 Chloridians overlooked the alien starport, gleaming silver against a rust-red world. I assure you, Ixcabod, my tale is real. Queen Claraxa was envoy to the human hive to broker an alliance. Our border is shared with 3 of their worlds. Humans are... Her grooming slowed as she decided the appropriate term. Eccentric. Eccentric, her compatriot repeated in disbelief. Queen Claraxa had trouble comprehending them too. I would argue that the humans are the most unique in the galaxy. No other race can compare. At this, Ixcabod rolled the colors in his eyes. Klaxrug frowned as much as her mandibles would allow. Something she picked up on Loam. She scanned the starport below, deciding on an explanation. See those ships below? That big one with the tall white shapes? Veldoran. They come from an ocean world racked by earthquakes, but they worship the 1,000 cliffs, each a religious hero or deity. And each of their ships is a facsimile, an avatar of a god. Each tenuously held together by grav cables and shield generators. Said to be the strongest ships in the galaxy, Ixcabod admired. Rather big for a cargo ship, must be picking up rust spice from the arboreal garden caves. I saw a ship like that while amongst the humans, massive and white, filled with outcroppings and crags. They said it destroyed stars. With the number of black holes in human territories, I suspect it is true. Ixcabod puzzled such a ship, his antennae tilting. I cannot fathom the power required for any race to have a single ship that could function as a star destroyer. World devastators, perhaps, but not stars. Klaxrug pointed to another ship just taking off. Tulrixian Betelgumper, able to open wormholes. They were the first ones the humans met, and the first to have their technology fall into human hands. Though the humans acquired the technology, they couldn't make use of it until they got a star drive. Not unless they wanted to cross the starless sands for many cycles. Don't see many of those Tulrixians around. I was part of a raid on one of their world cycles ago. They could only field 1 star drive at a time. Our queen said they tended to cross streams and negate each other. Indeed they do, Klaxrug chittered happily. The humans eventually got their star drives in trade, but all their hive worlds are connected by a network of what they called stargates. Available both on planet and with massive ones in space, they proved quite the nuisance for their Atroxian invaders. The pirate legions invaded Clay first. seeking to destroy the homeworld as they do, but met resistance by an endless stream of human warrior caste. In space, they were beset by a human armada, though they eventually managed to destroy the space portal to stem the tide. It was at that point that the Atroxians also invaded Loam, where we were ambushed during our cycle talk with the humans not Queen. During our cultural exploration, we observed many memories of the humans, from their world-ending wars to many invasions by their second and fourth planets. Once beautiful garden worlds, the second planet is now covered in toxic gas, and the other stripped of atmosphere and barren red by beta particle detonations. The other worlds in their home system were all gas and razor wind as well, which they fed on with their digidrones. We witnessed their sorrows and joys, their hopes and dreams, and even their most vivid nightmares. But if anything is most apparent, it is their larva-like curiosity and neurotic excitement. How so? Ixcabod inquired, watching the engine flare of the Beetle Gumper disappear into the now setting horizon. Didn't they meet the Atroxian force with pure numbers? The response Klaxrug made pulsed with amusement. They did, yes, but unlike the Belrugians and the Torixians and any other species I have memoried, the humans are the most varied by far. They claimed that the ships were not inspired by the races they have met, but that the technologies they acquired made them possible. They fielded a fleet of their star-eating cliff ships, Turg Digihive anger cubes, and even an eye-lens-shaped ship with 2 long warp drives mounted to it, which they claimed was their flagship, the Enterprise. Most importantly, not all these hive ships moved the same, nor did they have equivalent technology. When the Atroxian world enders arrived over Loam, the humans entrenched their star destroyer hive ships to deter them. Their Enterprise, and many other ships like it, wove between the enemy fleet with shields and Keldathi plasma lances. Their heavily armored battle stars and Digihive basis stars deployed thousands of drone craft, but I think what did the most damage was their beta particle explosives. If the Atroxians survived those starbursts, they would find an agonizing life ahead of them. I understand they have a variety of unique ships, Klaxrug, but you haven't told me why they are eccentric. Ixcabod's eyes flared orange in irritation. Klaxrug's chitin washed sorrow blue in apology. Humans are eccentric. Yes, yes. Another drone may argue insane. Queen Claraxa and her attendants witnessed it while aboard their flagship. Normally, one would keep their diplomatic ship far from battle, but the human hive leader laughed and told us the shields would hold. And if they didn't, they would have a blue box arrive to escort us to safety. Apparently, the humans are experimenting with time travel, though they can only go back 7 turns. The crew drones we saw were all bright calm, keeping score of the enemy ships destroyed and cheering when one blew up. You have dealt with the Atroxians before and remember their attacks on our hive worlds. The human war was not the carnage we faced then. When not serving their hive, humans make entertainment in digimemories and viewings of old battles and lives. The crew even joked about an Atroxian boarding party getting into the ship. But when the crew received word of the Clay Space Gate's destruction, they didn't tempt blind their eyes. An easy fix, they said, and that they'd just warp a fleet over to reinforce real quick. At one point, the Atroxians resorted to Q-stepping our illustrious queen to their ship, which made the humans angry. The Not Queen told his crew to open a hushed casket, and though I was not witness to what transpired afterwards, a crew drone later told me that a single human boldly boarded the enemy ship and saved our queen, killing all Atroxians that got in his way. Ixcabod mused. They sound like a powerful adversary. I see our queen's wisdom in allying with them. But why? Yes, but it is not the ships nor the technology that makes humans eccentric. It is the fact that their designs are not based on religion or rule standards, but on their dream memories. Their fiction, as they called it. They use technologies alien to them to make their wildest fantasies come true. And now that the Atroxians have been repelled, I hear the humans are heading to the Atroxian home system, acquired from the digibrain of the captured ship. Queen Claraxa begged them not to send a halo, but they reassured her they were only sending something of equivalent intent. I believe they called it a Death Star. The words of my human companion still rang in my ears as we approached the hilltop. I couldn't believe I was here to witness this madness. I should have been heading home to announce their plans to the royal family. They would immediately denounce humanity in close ranks, leaving them to their fate. Why am I here then, trudging through muddy terrain on a mountaintop, following the suicidal bastard who thought of this crazy plan? Why am I here? I sighed and trudged onwards, the sound of war drums pounding through the dimly lit morning sky. My human companion had a long, thick fabric bag slung over his shoulder and a large metallic case he carried too. It was long, painted black, and he carried it with exceptional care. Where? To his favorite spot up on the hilltop, which has a perfect clear view of the battlefield. And what a view it was! There, in an open field, in the open air, sat 5,000 Turanian troops of the Second Turanian Empire. My human companion seemed slightly less intimidated than I was. We had fought these madmen before. It took 10,000 lives to kick them off one of our colonies, and they only had 800 men then. We trudged along as I recalled the events that took place leading up to now. The Turanian Empire had come across humanity, a fledgling species only recently accounted for in the galactic community. The Turanian Empire found out about them despite their best efforts and laid a claim on them. Galactic Law Number 7A1 stated clearly that if any lesser species appears, any larger empire is clear to challenge this race to a fair battle in armed combat. If the defender wins, they keep their sovereignty and join the Galactic Union. The loser is assimilated into the winner's empire as a colony, whatever that may be, as slaves or workers or soldiers depending on the empire's needs. The Turanians usually took slaves of their new colonies. They almost succeeded in taking mine. The humans, however, were unamused by the state of affairs in the galaxy and opted out of the rules, abandoning the Union entirely. The only reason I am here is due to the fact we have decent trade relations with them. The royal family considers many humans their friends, so I was here more for moral support. The Turanians didn't take too kindly to humanity's actions after they rejected the Council's offer and stated they would defend their borders against any who come. The Turanians challenged them to the slaver's right. If they won, humanity would be their slaves. If they lost, they would leave humanity alone. The humans did one better and challenged them to a bout of Raganthar, or as they termed it, regicide. Humanity challenged the Emperor himself and laid out terms. They issued a challenge. They invoked their ancient warrior rights and sense of honor. Foolhardy, stupid. Anyone who did that never survived. The Turanians immediately jumped at the provocation. Well, they were rubbing their hands together the whole time, so I am certain it was intended. Humanity laid out the challenge, leveraging their sense of honor against them and challenging the Emperor himself to a duel. The humans stated if they can kill the Emperor on his own terms, the Turanian Empire cedes all control to humanity. The Emperor agreed. Of course, the Turanians don't know how to play fair, so they sent a massive army down to defend the Emperor. Humanity, according to the rules, could field an army of any size. This was 5,000 men. We expended 10,000 lives in order to defeat only 800. At this point, the galaxy had discarded humanity as just another pawn of the Turanian Empire and steeled themselves for a new galactic war with their new toys. So here we are, on a backwater planet climbing a mountain with a crazy human who made the challenge. Down below, 3 clinks away, sits the Emperor himself on his throne. The human in front of me stopped, pulling a device from his tool belt to his eyes and surveyed the scene. He looked around him and nodded in approval. Here's good. Let me set up shop here. It's perfect. He began to unravel his equipment and spent some time setting up a small camouflaged tent on the hilltop. He carefully set up a tent using various debris like rocks to help flatten his base out a bit, and used a device he called a spirit level to check the accuracy of his measurements. He lay flat on his belly to check his comfort, or something, and started collecting debris from the surrounding area to cover his tent with. Why are you coveting your tent with branches? Is it not uncomfortable enough? I asked quizzically, trying to hide my own form behind the line of bushes on the hill. I take it your species has no concept of camouflage then. I'm hiding, not making myself comfortable. Need to be sure they can't see me until after I take my shot, he said and checked his surroundings once again. You cannot be serious. Shot? What shot? You need artillery released by a battle cruiser to take them down. Believe me, we tried that. You humans are insane. I almost yelled at him. He simply sighed in response. I understand you are distressed, but would you be so kind as to keep your voice down? Thank you. I watched in fascination and dread at the sight of the human opening the long black box he had and pulled out some kind of weapon. It was as long as he was tall. What in the goddess's name is that? I asked, as I looked at it carefully. It had such a strange design. I was surprised he could even carry it. M400 Peacemaker, a direct descendant of the Chaytak .408 that was the M200 intervention. Beautiful, isn't it? Handle, stock, mount, and bipod are all custom-made with recoil-absorbing polycarbonate and heat-treated ceramics to give it a nice light weight despite the size. Its pressure-treated titanium body and barrel with chrome plating, the gun itself is Gauss-assisted. This one I'm loading with this, he said. Is that, what do you humans call a bullet? What even is it? I asked, as he handed me one of the two he had on him. It looked odd. A strange cylindrical object tapering off to one end with a strange blue glow to it. That is a .50 caliber Gauss round, primed for anti-tank warfare. It has a small amount of C4 as its base charge and uses the Gauss effect in the rifle to accelerate faster. Also, it's a shaped charge warhead like an RPG. The tip will detonate a small warhead which will force a small cone of molten metal at any target surface. Normally we use these as pinpoint shells to fight tanks or gunships, but well, here we are, he said calmly, checking his weapon with care. You only brought 2 bullets there. There are thousands down there. I know, and the rules say I only need to kill 1. Therefore, I only need 1 bullet, he said and racked the loading mechanism on his rifle, readying a shot. Shooting this smug bastard's head off will be quite funny. I think, as retribution when I have control of the Empire, I'm going to order his men to shoot themselves, he said, a crooked, menacing smile appearing on his face. You cannot be serious. Well, why? I am supposed to be with my daughter today. It's her 5th birthday. I was supposed to be teaching her how to swim. I will make these fucking idiots pay with their lives for making me miss my little girl's birthday. I'll make them pay in blood for wasting my time like this, he said, his smile turning into a sadistic scowl as he readied his rifle. And after I'm done here, everyone who abandoned us, refused to talk to us, anyone who cut us off, everyone who abandoned us to this fate, I'll put their entire leadership casts in front of a firing squad. Now, come on, little monkey. Show me your smile. Show me your face. Give old Caroline a perfect shot at your fat monkey face. I used my own set of viewfinder devices and checked. The Emperor was beginning a speech. He was growing tired of waiting and was going to storm the human city nearby. He stood from his throne and began to talk. My human friend ignored him and started talking to himself. Wind, south by southwest, 2.1 knots, he said, adjusting his scope. The Emperor turned slightly to grace his armored troops with his presence as he spoke. Target distance, 2.2 miles at plus 84.1 elevation, he said, moving slightly to compensate for the terrain. The Emperor waved his hands and smiled as he roused his troops to a fine fervor. One could hear the mighty roar of his subordinates calling for bloodshed. Planet gravity 0.83 Gs, target height at 8.4 feet, he said as he readied his gun to fire. I hear the sudden noise of an electrical field powering up. The Emperor moved with the grace of a leader and turned to face the men near the hillside and finished his speech. He raised his head high and smiled. There you are. He took a deep, strong breath and slowly let it out as he squeezed the trigger of his gun. The shot heard around the galaxy suddenly rang out. A mixture of an explosive and an electromagnetic discharge suddenly shattered the calm of the valley. The explosive force of the bullet exiting the chamber disturbed the sand and leaves in front of it in a strange spiral-like pattern. It was as if the world slowed down for me. I could clearly see the bullet flying almost unopposed through the air, forcing it asunder as it began to glow a bright, hot red. It flew over the heads of the regiments below and hit the Emperor square in his mouth, knocking him backwards into his throne. He sat there motionless for a split second. Then the shaped charge detonated, and his head suddenly came flying off. It thumped harmlessly on the ground in front of the throne, its expression of an agonized grimace. Then the sonic boom of the shot rang through the air as the assembled army watched its leader's head fall lifeless to the ground. That was the very moment the Turanian Empire died. Barely 10 human years later, humanity had deposed the Galactic Council and established the Terran Federation. I looked up from my desk, surprised at the sight of a human, clad like some kind of heavily armored monk standing in my office. He stood there with a noticeable smile and looked down at me. It was unusual to have a human around the station unless there was a problem. Humans were the Federation's problem solvers, so his mere presence was a matter of concern. Not just for me, but for the entire station. "Hello, I was not aware of a human delegation today. Is there an issue?" I asked, gesturing for him to sit in the chair opposite my desk. "Good morning, sir. There is no issue. I'm here to tell you about your welcome gift for joining the Federation. It is finally ready," he said as he sat down. "Gift? I was not aware of this kind of tradition." I tilted my stubby head to the side in confusion. No new members are aware it exists. Some never will. It isn't a gift per se for joining the Federation. It's more a thank you kind of thing for fulfilling your obligations. Yours is finally ready for you to collect. He simply sat down calmly, smiling at me all the while. "Well, what exactly is it?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. "2 ships, custom built from our tech and your ship designs, specially made for you. One ship will serve in the Federation core fleet. The other will be added as a ship in your own navy." He handed me a data pad and I looked it over. "I see. Well, we could always use more ships. What are these ships like exactly?" I asked with an eye stalk slightly tilted to the left. "You will see. We love giving gifts and things. The surprise and shock makes it worth it. It is ready for collection. As a consequence here." He handed me a very ornate letter with a golden wax seal. I took it, trying to be careful not to get any mucus on it. "Oh my. With this, you will have temporary access to the human home star system. It will detail procedures and operations for the exchange. Make sure you are on your best behavior," he said with a smile that tried to calm me down. I was not calm. This meant that we were one of a very select few that had ever seen humanity's home star system. 71 different species in the Federation. Only 7 had ever seen it. And one of them came uninvited. They aren't around anymore. Oh my goodness. He just chuckled in that strange way humans did. "Follow procedures and protocol outlined in the letter. Bring a delegation ship plus a transport ship. A skeleton crew to just get the ships out of dock. A minimum of 50 men for both ships." I understand. Have a nice day," I said, the shock of the situation finally getting to me. "Same to you, friend," he said with a smile. He gave me a bow and left calmly. I unsealed the envelope and read the letter. "Dear esteemed colleague, congratulations. This letter is to inform you that your new Federation-sponsored warship pair is available for collection. These warships are a gift to you to signify that you have successfully completed all obligations set for you by the Federation, and are built as a thank you for your service. These warships are custom-made of the highest quality materials, of the highest quality craftsmanship, with technology that far exceeds your own. Please bring a minimum complement of 100 Starship crew to allow you to take control. This is considered a skeleton or minimum operations crew. You can sort out an actual crew roster yourself when they are in full operation. Please find enclosed a data shard containing a series of one-time only single-use access codes. You will be permitted 2 ships, 1 troop transport to operate the ships, along with a delegation or diplomatic ship, no larger than a battleship class for this exchange. If we see more than 2 ships, or a ship of larger class that's specified, we will open fire. With sincere regards, Reverend Father Julius Mortis, Philly Vacua, Callisto Drive Yards." Philly Vacua? What the hell is a Philly Vacua? Well, I suppose if we are invited, we must oblige. I must tell the Emperor immediately. The situation was somewhat austere. In our haste to arrive, we had no time to prepare. The Emperor seemed somewhat unfazed as he sat in my seat at the head of the bridge. Sparks of stardust and space debris flashed past us as it disintegrated against the warp shield. We would be there any minute. I was nervous. Damned nervous. So much so there was more mucus from my tentacles than usual. The Emperor, as per always, was dry as the desert sands. 2 minutes to contact, the ship's pilot said, calling the ship to attention. Good. We are almost there. Nervous, Kimchach? The Emperor looked at me, smiling at my secretions. What gave me away? I chuckled half-heartedly, shuffling with discomfort. Make sure we activate the cleaning apparatus before we disembark, is all I'm saying. This is quite the occasion. He reached down and grabbed his beverage, a drink called tea that we have become somewhat addicted to. Bubble collapse in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The pilot announced as we saw the particles of dust around us begin to slow. The solar system suddenly came into view. Everyone in the ship either did or barely held off the urge to spew defensive ink everywhere as we saw the massive fortress that was Sol. We appeared outside of Pluto, which had been turned into a gigantic static defense turret. A legion of hundreds of warships of every possible size and class immediately turned their attention towards us. I barely managed to not shit myself at the sight of the sheer quantity of cannons mounted to those ridiculous hulks of metal. Human warships had a different kind of elegance to them, unlike most ships in the galaxy. Human warships lacked in style and contours, making it up in size, armor, and sheer amount of weaponry. Even if they didn't have the technological superiority, the sheer quantity by itself would make fighting them nothing short of suicidal. We jumped out of our exoskeletons a bit at the sound of a hail. This is Sol Defense Fleet Epsilon 8. Identify yourself immediately. I am Emperor Juice Chib of the Sarangathi Imperium. We have an invitation to be here. My Emperor, ever the stoic master, barely flinched. Please hold for verification. We have you on schedule. Our instruments went crazy at the action of 6 dozen warships scanning us at once, all of us collectively trying not to ink ourselves. Verified. Proceed vector 330 by 488, Callisto Docks, Bay 47. Copy that. The pilot had to stop himself and clear his throat to stop a squeaky voice. Copy that. We are in motion. I heard a subtle laugh over the comm as the radio crackled out. Human ships dispersed with 2 of the larger cruisers forming up with us. It took us about an hour in sublight speeds to get there. It was truly an incredible sight to see. Thousands, tens of thousands of ships, all of human design, all operating in near-perfect concert as they drifted in space around the star system. A few smaller craft, mining vessels and cargo ships decided to come closer to us to figure out what we are. A few humans could be seen through windows, and we waved at them, getting a wave back in response. We arrived at Callisto, a barren, icy rock saturated in the human refining industry. It was here I first glanced at them. 2 ships, our ships, sitting in a dockyard. One in clear Federation colors, the other in ours. A stark contrast to human warships. I looked at some other ships while I could see them. Danthraki, Cassini, Olivarkis, Parandi. All of them. Just sitting there. What in the abyss are they doing here? 2 ships, a pair for every species in the galaxy. Even the bioships of the Tailaxu Hive. How did they get these? The entire crew of both ships shared a concerned glance as we slowly moved into place in the only empty spot available. A soft thunk signaled we were docked to the station. The Emperor stood up and we all instantly snapped out of our stupor to full attention. Right, let's go then. By the abyss, this system is fascinating, he said as he headed towards the airlock. The security team that greeted us was minimal. One of the human ambassadors I knew well was there. The most striking thing I saw, however, was the group of 7 monks standing nearby, wearing dark purple robes, gilded with gold trimming. Each one had a face mask of an intricate and handmade design connected to a very high-quality pressure system. Under the robes, I could clearly see heavy augmentation and armor plating. Each one carried with him a plasma spear in his right hand, a pistol in his left holster, and a rifle of some kind on his back. We tried to ignore the sight and greeted my fellow ambassador with the Emperor's blessing. Andrew, my friend, so good to see you. I held my tentacle out to him. He grabbed it gently with a smile as we shook hands. Indeed it is. An incredible day indeed. I wish you told us you were coming. We would have set out a red carpet or something. Had no idea the Emperor himself was coming. Andrew bowed to our Emperor in greeting. The Emperor smiled. When given an opportunity to see the home system of the Federation's founders, do you really think I would miss this? Indeed. So you have probably noticed on your approach what exactly sits in these dockyards. I assume you are curious, he said with a very cheeky smile. Indeed we are. How did you get those ships? Even a Teilaxu Hive bioship, I said absent-mindedly. We made them. Well, they did, Andrew said, gesturing to the 7 monks nearby. Wait, what? These are called Grande Royale-class cruisers. Battlecruiser class, modular design template with a full suite of custom weapons, high-grade materials, and reactors. Identical, 2 of a kind, save for the paint job. Come, you need to see it to believe it. Let's show you your fleet ship first, Andrew said with a heady smile as we all filtered out into the viewing ports towards the ship. A layer of our excess mucus followed us, with tiny plate-sized robots behind us cleaning up the mess as 100 of us squidged off toward the docks. We all gathered round the viewing windows, crowding around the dock as we looked at our new ships. I had a ship engineer near me. He had his face fully pressed into the glass, his bulbous eye stalks firmly squashed against the plexiglass. He let out a loud, sensual squeal before collapsing in a wobbly heap on the floor, a babbling mess. Most other engineers or navigators likewise did the same. It was a collective orgasm of sorts. Both myself and the Emperor, along with a few officers, stood back at the sight and profusely apologized at the embarrassing display. The humans simply smiled at us, nodding knowingly, as if their own engineers suffered the same fate. Andrew held his hand up at us and offered the officers the first look at the interior. We walked in, and immediately one of our officers noticed something. This ship was magnificent, beautiful, regal, divine. The air itself held the freshest starship air I could ever breathe, as if I were in my own home on my homeworld. The air had a faint scent of some kind of plant native to the human homeworld that my data slate described as pine conifer, and it calmed and softened us as we breathed it in. The floor we squidged upon was soft. Soft like the beaches of our homeworld, and the mucus we left behind us immediately vanished, soaking up into the floor without a trace, leaving it polished and immaculate. Every single surface, from guardrails to ceiling tiles, is covered in an engraved pattern, polished to a near-mirror sheen and sterilized to an absolute state of cleanliness. Parts of the ship are made of a certain wood type that is used to make luxury furniture. It is varnished and cleaned to a perfect shine. The ship fit perfectly into our biology and customs, crew quarters full of large-sized aquariums that could keep us in comfort, even under duress. Various holodeck displays containing our favorite past times and board games. The main bridge had control stations fitted to make us as comfortable as possible. Holodeck and solid screen displays for all ship functions. The mess hall was already fully stocked, built more like a restaurant than a starship's mess hall. Every surface is sterile, clean, tables made of our homeworld trees, chairs made of a luxury metal covered in a thick cushion of Aracanthian silk, again from our homeworld. The engineering officers who followed us were blubbing, wobbling uncontrollably the more they looked at the ship. Wait a minute, wait, something is off here, the Emperor said, taking a very close look at a panel access point. He opened it, the sight of the gears and pistons inside making an engineer squeal in delight. This is... He looked at Andrew. Is this entire ship handcrafted? Andrew laughed. Yes, it is. Every part, piece, and component is fully handcrafted from absolute scratch out of the best available materials, specially mined, refined, and processed by the ship's makers. Every single engine turbine blade is precision-made and custom-crafted in its own custom cast. Every pipe is precision-crafted, every railing is hand-welded, every single piece of this ship from floor tiles to plasma cannons is all made by the master hands of master craftsmen. The monks came into view behind him, and all of it custom-made by only 7 men, built over a 2-year period. Plasma cells fully charged, reactor fully fueled, canteen fully stocked. She's ready to go at your order. The tallest of these monks said, handing me a velvet bag with the key cards and access codes. One ship, this one, is meant for operation in the Federal Defense Fleet. You will crew it with a full complement of your best operators, and they will serve the greater whole in the Force Recon Response Fleet. The other ship, in your colors, will be added to your personal navy and serve in whatever capacity you wish. We only wish you follow standard operations protocol when dealing with any issues or disputes. Don't use this ship to engage in personal disputes or vendettas. She has 50 times the reactor power and combat strength of a dreadnought, Andrew said calmly. So please, use this power wisely. This finally sent our officers over the edge, and they collectively came, in yet another face-palmingly embarrassing display. My Emperor turned a shade of purple. "By the abyss," he said, then joined the embarrassing display. "But the other ships, the Tylaxu bioship, the Dothraki Covenanter," I asked as I filtered through the access codes I was given. "All ready to be collected, waiting to be united with their masters, when they can be proven to be worthy of their power. You have more than proven your capabilities, more than proven you can be trusted. We look forward to working with you," Andrew said with a smile, holding out a hand for me to shake. I shook with more enthusiasm than I knew I could muster, and stumbled over my Emperor's babbling form as I headed up to the bridge, dragging a pilot with me. This will be awesome. "I don't understand," the creature said. "What are you asking exactly?" Obadon paused to scratch his comb before answering. Anybody else, he reflected with a touch of bitterness, would have given up by now. 3 weeks of frantic, scrabbling battles between programmers, linguists, and supercomputers to make a working translator. Another full week giving a crash course in Alliance history, politics, and culture to this new race's ambassador. And he still found himself having to explain the most basic concepts. It wore him ragged. True, anyone else would have quit in disgust, but Obadon had been cursed with that most terrible affliction, a burning curiosity, which had driven him into an ambassadorship position at the edge of known space. Which meant that he was the closest representative on hand when the signal had been detected from the outermost planet under Alliance control. Which meant that he was now slogging along with this Oomta ape who needed to be spoken to like a child. "I am asking if your race has achieved Lablonamedadon, the, Great Planetary Dispersal," he said. "You do not know this term?" "Lablo." "What?" "No, I don't know what that means." What was it? The human seemed far more interested in the view out the portside window than their conversation as they began to finish docking with Sheltered Cove. It gazed wild-eyed at the stately drifting of tremendous vessels around the central hub. The creature had likely never seen a starport before. Obadon rattled air through his beak in exasperation. "Greater Planetary Dispersal," he said, "is a concept developed by the storied philosopher Gadolin Mablotobinoidijang in the 3rd century of the Alliance's 12th iteration, inspired upon observing the disruption of Upsilon IV's bureaucracy following famine induced by solar flares believed to..." "You're not even listening to me anymore, are you?" No, keep going. I'm listening," said the human, eyes still glued to the window. "Can you boil it down for me?" Obadon had to flick quickly through his translator device to determine the analogy. Boil it down, a cooking term. How quaint. "Very well," he said. "The principle states that there is a minimum number of planets, spread out across many light years, required for a spacefaring species to survive any single natural disaster while still being close enough for feasible travel. Be it an impact event or solar flare, or even supernova or gamma-ray burst, the dispersal theory allows the other planets to at best provide immediate aid and at worst prepare and evacuate. In essence, we spread ourselves far enough that we cannot be wiped out." He scratched at his comb again. Gadolin proposed that 6 planets over a wide enough area be enough to ensure survival. Since his death, adjusting for advancements in hyperdrive technology and the discovery of further galactic anomalies, it has been raised to 8. 4 races of the Alliance have achieved Lablonamedadon at great expense, while the other 2 are approaching. With your race's admission into the Alliance, we will lend our aid and resources that you may reach Lablonamedadon within 1,000 years. That got the human's attention. He pulled his gaze free from the massive docking arms finally latching onto their ship and turned to look intently at Obadon. "Hold on," he said. "You're telling me that each member of the Alliance has 8 populated planets?" Obadon sighed, but only half in frustration. He found that he actually quite enjoyed impressing the yokel with the Alliance's achievements. "Not all," he said. "As I said before, the 2 lesser members, the Glitpan and Treplicate, have not yet reached the 8 planets required for Lablonometodon." Honestly, how had these creatures even managed to leave their system? The human's brow furrowed. "Why not more?" Obadon sputtered for a moment. "More?" he said. "I don't understand the question. This may be difficult for you to understand, but the terraformation and colonization of a planet is a tremendous undertaking, requiring most of a single civilization's resources and spanning many centuries. With 8 planets guaranteeing survival, what possible reason could we have for more?" The human seemed about to reply when the door slid open to reveal an honor guard of Treplicate soldiers, their armor glistening black in the artificial light. "Ah," said Obadon, "it seems your escort has arrived. They'll show you to the council chamber." The creature rose from his seat, hesitated, turned for some parting comment, then clearly thought better of it. As he passed the Treplicate, they formed around him in a square, feet clicking with unnerving synchronization, and walked with him down the docking tube. Obadon watched him go. Despite the constant difficulties, he had enjoyed instructing the creature. He was almost sorry for how badly they were going to screw it over. Heblik sat glumly in his chair. He glanced to his left, where the rest of the council were seated in balconies of ascending height, a symbol of the hierarchy of their races. Immediately to his left were the Treplicate senators, an insect species, quiet and precise. As ever, only the subtle twitching of their antennae were markers for any form of emotion. Above them were the Maprock, great lumbering mammals, then the Prang, a sentient conglomeration of annelids. Highest of all were the Toglanidan, preening their jeweled quills, and the Zobafin, whip-thin reptilians peering imperiously over their railing. It was their original union that had created the alliance that ruled today. The 6 balconies circled a small podium from on high. Whenever this human arrived, he would find himself standing at the bottom of a long, narrow shaft, craning upwards while the council could glare down at leisure, like a specimen on a slide, to be examined and scrutinized through the barrel of a microscope. Heblik slouched a bit further. He should have been happy. Finally, his people could move up a rung in the alliance. For the first time in almost a millennium, they would be able to reap the long-promised profits of their venture. But for all that, the emotions that continued to rule his mind were pity and disgust and fuming, helpless rage. A fanfare rang out through the chamber, and he straightened up. More than 20 meters below, the great doors were opening to reveal the almost robotic Treplicate bodyguard and their human charge. As he came to the center of the floor, the guards pivoted, paused, and marched away in what could only be described as a dignified skitter. Heblik leaned close to the edge to look at the human. The creature seemed a crude, chimeric mashing of each race of the Alliance. It was a mammal, like the Maprock, but lanky, like the Zobafin, with a bright shock of yellow fur at its crown, almost like the flamboyant fleshy combs bobbing on the Toglanidan representatives. It lacked the fur coat of the Maprock, instead having a smooth pink hide, much like Heblik's own amphibious skin. The council chamber was specifically designed to excite a number of psychological reactions in an organism entering for the first time, primarily awe and fear. Heblik had looked forward to seeing these emotions in the human, that he could get a grasp on how they were expressed in an alien face. But in this he was disappointed. The creature's visage, looking up to the council in all its glory, was as blank and unchanging as that of a Treplicate stoic. It locked eyes with Heblik, then looked to each balcony in turn, with a serene calm. The only creature it did not resemble was the Prang senator. Then again, neither did anyone else. The High Counselor, Shizin, rose to his feet and bellowed the formal address down to the human. Though his voice may not have reached him, it was carried down and blasted out of speakers at ground level, that he may feel the full impact of the address. The Allied Council, delegates of the 6 races, convenes on this day to celebrate first contact with the human race and to extend our greetings and welcome you into our fold. He paused, arms splayed in a power stance on the railing. Many who find themselves at the bottom of the council chamber believe they need to shout to be heard, so far from their audience. Their foolish straining was a continual source of amusement for the pettier delegates. Heblick knew that more than a few senators were waiting eagerly to see if the freshly arrived creature would make the same mistake. In this, they too were disappointed. When the human spoke, it was in an even, deliberate pitch, trusting the hidden microphones to pick up his words. I, Ambassador Iosef Baboyan, hereby accept and reciprocate your greeting, he said. I hope that our meeting may work to foster happiness and prosperity between our races. An odd choice of phrasing, but seemingly polite. The High Counselor, satisfied, drew back to stand fully upright. Prosperous for your race, undoubtedly, he boomed. The combined resources and technological advancement of the Alliance will be a great boon to humanity. In time, you too will know the luxury and security we enjoy. Now he leaned forward again. Here it comes, thought Heblick. The High Counselor's voice softened to a sibilant hiss. But I wonder, will we prosper from an alliance with you? The human's face remained dispassionate, but no doubt he wondered at the sudden breach in courtesy. I think you would find it rewarding, he said. You have many marvelous technologies, but we do as well. Our sciences are likely to explore branches unknown to yours, and their sharing would benefit all members of the Alliance. Further, we have deep and storied cultures, whose art and beliefs would bring spiritual enrichment to... No doubt, the High Chancellor cut in. But our concern is more for rewards of a rewarding nature. Raw materials, valuable minerals and elements, trained and untrained labor, that sort of thing. You must understand, we will be investing a great deal into the advancement of your race. We require certain guarantees that these investments will pay off. The human's eyes narrowed, a reaction at last. Was it suspicion? Readying for an attack or a gesture of submissiveness? Or was he merely squinting to see the High Chancellor better? Such as, he said. Then the hammers came down, one after another. Outrageous taxes to the Alliance. Loans saddled with crushing compound interest on any and every form of foreign aid. Grossly unbalanced trade agreements. Unpaid human labor to be supplied to every corner of Alliance territories. Each species stepped forward in turn to put another weight around humanity's neck. As his own species came up to deliver their terms, Heblick gripped the arms of his seat until the blood left his fingers. The Glitpan had struggled under their virtual serfdom to the Alliance for almost 1,000 years, yet here they were, ready to saddle another innocent species with the same debts. It was gunboat diplomacy, the whole human race, carved up into spheres of influence. At the same time, he marveled at the humans' self-control. According to the official records, his own people had raged furiously at the revelation. The Prang had proclaimed the blackest curses on the Alliance upon their initiation. Even the Triplicate had suffered nervous fits and begged for better terms when the facade of geniality had been stripped away. But in the end, all had realized the inevitability of their situation and bent their necks to the collar. And yet the humans stood there, unmoving, still wearing a placid expression. Heblick wondered if he even understood what was happening. Perhaps he was in shock. When the final terms had been delivered and the senators took their seats, after enduring almost an hour of alien creatures deciding his race's fate for him, the human had only one question. And if we refuse the terms? The High Chancellor's toothy maw spread in a smug grin that Heblick would have loved to put his fist through. Then you will face the full might of the Alliance. The combined forces of 44 planets will bear down, annihilate whatever pitiful military strength you have, and claim your planet. Your species will be shattered, split apart, and sent to every planet enslaved. We will find a use for humanity, one way or the other. The human stood in silence. He fiddled with the device strapped to his wrist for a moment, then looked back up to the council. You people, all of you people, are lucky, he began. In the past week, I've learned as much as I could about the histories of your races, everything I could. It was my job, but more than that, I was eager and curious to learn about our new neighbors. I'm sure you hid as much as you could, especially about how you seem to screw over every race you can find. But I learned enough. Enough to look at you all and say, lucky. He began to pace the narrow reaches of the podium. Did he feel caged? Or was it merely a human custom when speaking? Each of your species evolved, advanced, eventually tore free of the confines of their atmosphere, he continued, and found new species waiting for them. Perhaps not the best neighbors. Heblik snorted at the obscene understatement. But you knew so early on that you were not alone. Humanity has not been that lucky. We evolved in what seems to be a particularly empty region of space. When we broke free of our planet, there was no one waiting for us. You don't know how long we have wondered if we were alone in this universe. You have no idea how long it has taken to find you. Heblik blinked both sets of eyelids, confused. What did it mean? How long? Hadn't the Alliance been there to meet humanity as soon as it reached the stars? Hadn't the creature come from an underdeveloped world in a ship that could barely break orbit? How much did they actually know about the humans? He heard the muttering of the counselors beside him, the quiet discussion from the balconies above, and realized that he was not the first to ask this question. It was not a comforting thought. And so, the ambassador went on, when we found the first unmistakable evidence of alien communication, I jumped at the chance to make first contact. I took the first ship I could lay my hands on, a clunker held together with spit and prayer, so eager was I to finally know that we were no longer alone. You know, I had 2 hours of air left in that heap before you picked me up. He paused. There was no sound but the frantic whisper of fingers flicking across data slates as the counselors not currently sifting through the scarce data they had on humanity looked up clunker, spit and prayer, and heap. Heblik, on the other hand, could not free his eyes from the human. If it felt any pleasure at the consternation caused, it showed no sign. We've wondered so much what you would be like. There have been uncountable stories told of how you would look, how you would speak, how you would think. So much we wondered how you would think differently than us. Your thoughts of good and evil, on individuality, even how you perceive time. We wondered what words you have that remain beyond translation, that require an alien mind to even comprehend. Yet here I am, the human said, and I have to say I'm disappointed. There is nothing new to learn from you. There is not one petty, banal cruelty you've laid upon me today that humans have not committed against ourselves. We have words for everyone. Imperialism, exploitation, zero-sum mercantilism. The human paused. Bad manners. He glanced at his wrist device again. But there is one word we don't have. A concept so alien that it defies comprehension. A word unthinkable to a species that has been so lonely for so long. Lablona Medadon. Now he looked up straight into Heblik's eyes once more. Heblik shivered. The human held his gaze a moment, then turned to meet the gazes of each balcony. Even now, he said, I look at you and wonder how you could even think of such a term. The minimum needed to ensure survival, the maximum you are willing to sacrifice to expand your horizons, I can find only one word that comes close to translating Lablona Medadon. Now he locked eyes with the High Counselor. Complacency. Heblik became aware of his aide, tugging frantically at his arm. He was pale and held a data slate in a trembling hand. We received multiple transmissions almost as soon as the human started talking, he said. All video feeds. Heblik took the slate cautiously. His first thought was that he was looking at a view through compound eyes, like the fractured feeds he'd seen of triplicate media. Then he realized the slate was displaying hundreds of videos, each showing markedly similar images. He zoomed in closer. They were humans. Each screen was a different transmission of groups of humans, some in groups of 3 or 4, some in crowds almost too large to pick out individuals. Humans of wide variety in color, height, and size, but all unmistakably human. Quite unlike their stoic representative, these humans were clearly caught in the throes of some powerful emotion. Their faces were contorted in bizarre fashion, and their limbs were splayed or thrashed about. He zoomed closer. Many had some form of liquid flowing from their eyes. He skimmed through videos, too caught up to notice that the human had stopped speaking, that every other counselor had been given data slates, that the council chamber had gone silent. Image after image after image. More humans, more diverse than he could believe. Each video held different humans, different buildings, different skies, different stars. He went cold with a sudden, terrifying suspicion. He grabbed at his aide. "Where are all of these coming from?" "We mapped out a display of all the points of origin," the aide said. He tapped the screen with quaking fingers. "Here it is." Heblick looked at the spatial model. It took a second to orient himself. They were here, and all the blue points were Alliance worlds, and all the red points were... He jerked to his feet, stared down wild-eyed at the human. He was not the first. Across the council, members were arguing furiously amongst themselves, shouting down at the human, or merely sitting in shock. But the noise that gathered rose and mixed itself into an incoherent, frothy mess, was killed in an instant by the crisp sound of a cleared throat. The counselors turned, as Heblick had, to look down at the human. He held their attention as tightly as if they were rambunctious schoolchildren, waiting to find out just how much trouble they were in. "By now, I'm sure you've all received the message," he said, face still as expressionless as ever. "All of humanity is in undivided celebration, knowing that we are no longer alone. All of humanity." He spread his arms wide. "The 38 planets, 12 lunar colonies, 15 asteroid settlements, and 23 drifter fleets of the Terran Federation send their love. Hundreds of billions of humans are eagerly awaiting my return and the news that I bring. So the only question I have left for all of you is, what kind of neighbors do you want us to be?" Humanity was the laughingstock of the universe. They were short, ugly, unimpressive creatures. Gestation periods too long to be a swarming menace of sheer numbers. No razor claws, armored shells, or horrible poisons. Even their intellects, the things they themselves prized over all else, were merely average in the grand scheme of races. Nothing they made could come close to the technological brilliance of the Court Uthla, the efficiency of a Turtrother, or the beauty of Abfuri. So we, the collective galactic community, simply laughed at them. We gave them the basic communication devices all races receive when they become post-FTL, and left them to their own devices. We gave them the standard warnings, not to fuck with other post-FTL races, or we will annihilate them. They shrugged, mumbled something about mad, whatever that is, and continued on their merry little way. So they grew and thrived. Their little galactic empire expanded outward more than any other race. We didn't care. An unlimited universe means more than enough room for every race. Soon, they would be bored, like every other race, and begin their great project. They would find one niche and carve it beyond any other race, just like every other race before them. If we had bothered to read the history of this sophomoric and frankly substandard race, we would have wiped them out before they could get out of the Sol system. No other race had the concept of tenacity. While other races were so efficient, they had never encountered resistance. Even on their own planets, humans did not. While every other race saw their native environment as a plaything from the word go, humans had struggled since coming down from the trees they used to call home. The one thing humans had over anything else was they never, ever gave up. They would run after their prey, never catching it. Until, that is, their prey laid down and died from exhaustion. While every other race saw virtue in nothing else but ease of life, human mythologies universally condemn hedonism. Excess pleasure was a sign of weakness, paradoxically. Their heroes, the archetypes that thrived from the first intelligible sound from their throats until now, has been those who seek challenge far beyond their abilities. The lone human standing against entire armies, against fantastical creatures, against another human who has been corrupted by that dreaded efficiency and now holds powers meant for gods. Their religions all masturbating over how powerless and helpless they are against a being beyond their comprehension. Their horror stories not focused around losing their power, like every other sensible race, but set up against an enemy that is even more tenacious than themselves. Their J-Sons and Vampires are simply humans without limits. While other races' media showed how much better they would be than the yet-to-be-discovered alien life forms, Humans continue to portray themselves and weak, sniveling creatures who only won by the last bullet in their gun, or else by the fact they lasted a few seconds longer. After studying their works of art for years, I asked a human why this was. He looked at me, gave me a look my sensor told me was condescension, and simply said, "If we win right away, there isn't any tension." I asked if he would not prefer my lightning reflexes, or perhaps massive claws. He laughed. "Power corrupts," is what he told me. So foolish were we, content to sit upon our mountains, that when we first encountered them, we were shocked. It was like an opposing universe alliance, one built on conquest and rage, the complete counterpart to our guarded but peaceful community. Their fangs were just a little bit sharper, their brains a little bit better, their muscles a little bit stronger. We were now the weaker side, outmatched in every way. We had no idea what to do. It was called the 22nd War, because that's how long it took for our generals to decide that fighting was useless, and that we would be destroyed either way. We might as well enjoy our last few minutes. This baffled the humans. While we gorged ourselves on the finest foods, they prepared. While the races in our council went extinct one after another, humanity scavenged the enemy ships who were accidentally hit by friendly fire. While we fled our planets, retreating further and further so we could live in excess a little longer, they entrenched themselves into a line. Humans took the weapons we had devised when we needed to keep up with our neighbors. Only one really had any impact on them. The humans called it an EMP on steroids. All technology was rendered useless, except for the most primitive of kinetic weapons. The only problem no one could really fix about it was that it hit friendlies as well. It wiped us all back to the primitive pre-FTL ages. In such a state, we stood even less of a chance. The humans didn't care. The massive beasts of Yursotho the Seth shredded their front lines, while they pelted their armor hides with metal slugs. While their generals were always at a disadvantage due to worse military engagements, the humans made sure every acre of land was fought for tooth and nail. Every single last human fought past any reasonable member of another race would. The last cry of every human commander was, "Hold the goddamned line." Humans, in the number of untold trillions, sacrificed themselves in what they would later describe as routine acts of war heroism. Eventually, though, the enemy slowly crept forward over their home worlds. Eventually, they pushed all the way back to the human capital world, the last planet belonging to the humans that could put up any fight, Earth. We had all long retreated back, but watched the transmission with fascination. The cold metallic voice of the translator rang out in the capital of Earth, addressing the last bastion of hope for humanity. "Humans, you have proven your worth to us. Lay down your arms and accept your place as our servants. Your courage is adequate." There was a long silence in the human capital. We all awaited their response. The losses on both sides had been massive. The humans, for all their faults, had managed to wipe out over half the races that had made up the enemy. They had earned their place. I would be lying if I said we all weren't jealous, furious that this race of bald monkey people had been deemed worthy, but not us. The radio transmission crackled back to life, broadcasting their reply. "No, we find your courage lacking." Then the lines went dark. Instead of the dying hum of the EMP on steroids, there was a sudden burst. The humans had blown up Earth, their crown world, their paradise. They would not bend knee. An explosion so massive and unexpected that only the humans who survived were those that occupied small colonies far beyond our own retreat line. Even we, as far back as we were, felt the scorch of this explosion. This massive release of energy wiped out the last of the enemy, but humans had paid a sacrifice far greater than any we could have fathomed. Their entire galactic history now reduced to a few scant colonies. Yet, on their communication lines, they were cheering. "It worked! It worked!" We killed them all. We were dumbfounded. Billions, trillions of colonies beyond the reaches of space we had bothered to look. They all lit up like a shower of sparks, all previously dark, under strict orders never to use detectable technology until they were sure of the enemy's defeat. They carved their niche. They were a phoenix, something with endurance beyond what we anticipated. A comm request came through to the High King. We opened the line. He spoke in our universal tongue. I am the leader of the United Space Colonies of Humanity. In the 23 minutes it took for you to realize what happened to our home, we have evoluted you." The High King simply had no words. These are the niches of man. Whereas you are content to live your short, insipid lives, we will become greater. The broadcast inspired fear in our people. Was the enemy of the enemy really our friend? Yes, we have evoluted you. Those who are smarter, those who are stronger, we find you lacking. We braced for the declaration of war. We would wipe out your cowardly asses with them, but frankly, you don't present enough of a challenge for us. Humans were the laughing stock of the universe, once. Galvasan, senior diplomat of the Groby delegation, was in a truly abysmal mood. For 300 years, peace and stability had been maintained by the Galactic Council, of which his people were a founding member. Today, he had the unenviable task of dealing with one of their newest and most hated members, humanity. It has come to the attention of the Galactic Council that humanity has violated international law, Galvasan announced solemnly to the creature before him. "I trust you are empowered to speak for your species." The short-bearded creature shrugged. "Nobody else is going to waste their time with you, so sure." A flash of anger flickered across the bulbous face of the Groby. He stared at the tiny being before him, not even 6 feet tall, small even for a Groby child. The human's physical stature seemed to perfectly match its immature attitude. "Are you aware of the conservation treaties regarding the Juftbar system?" The human paused to retrieve a tablet from his back pocket. "Let's see. Here we are. Yes. All right, I've read the treaty. This is what we've violated, you say?" "Yes! The treaty clearly states that no species may establish a colony site in orbit of any planet in the system, nor on the surface of any planet in the system." "Then what's the issue, Groby?" "The issue is you've established a planetary colony on Juftbar 2. Puzzled, the human looked at the hollow map flickering on the wall of the ship's meeting room. "Where?" he asked. Galvasan poked the holograph, causing it to flicker and distort. "Right there, in that mountain range. That's a duck blind. As per the Galactic Council laws on the observation of endangered, preserved, or non-affiliated species, any member may establish an observation facility on any world containing said species, providing that A, the observation facility is sufficiently concealed, see Appendix A of said treaty, and B, no direct interaction occurs with the aforementioned species unless absolutely necessary for the safety of said research team. It cannot be a duck blind if you have 40,000 inhabitants," the Groby shot back. Utterly unconcerned, the human grinned and answered, "Ah, we built the duck blind above our colony. I see where the confusion came from now. Still, all settled, so you can go." "This is not settled. The treaty forbids colonization of this planet." To Galvasan's horror, the human removed an ornately carved pipe from his back pocket, and with no regard for common decency, began to fill it with narcotic herbs. "The treaty forbids colonies on the surface, Groby. I read the treaty just minutes ago, all 6 pages of it. Nowhere in that sad excuse for a legal document does it say you can't build a colony inside a planet. The only access is via the duck blind, with all passage done in accordance with the proper treaties concerning the use of said facility. Hidden entrance, underground colony, no laws broken." Galvasan's head began to bobble with barely contained anger. "You know very well that is not in keeping with the spirit of the treaty." The human's thick eyebrows narrowed as he took the most aggressive puff of a pipe the Galvasan had ever witnessed. "Now you listen here, you wobbly-headed dingbat. It's not our fault that none of your sad excuse for a species knows how to draw up a legal document. When we joined your galactic community, the first thing we did was provide you with legal documentation concerning the rights and responsibilities of every species known and unknown with regards to our domains." "Yes, and those documents were ludicrous. The Treaty of Sol was 300,000 pages. Exactly. I defy you to tell me you don't know what's expected of you when in Sol. But most of it was absolutely pointless. You included a section forbidding the use of non-existent superweapons. They'll exist one day," the human countered. "You had an entire subsection dedicated to a zombie apocalypse. Exactly what are the odds of the dead coming back to life and feasting on the living?" They're a damn sight higher than the odds of you winning this argument. Galvasan gave a cry of frustration and despair. Fine. If you aren't going to behave like a civilized species, we'll just have to do this the hard way. You are officially in violation of galactic law. A barking laugh answered the declaration. Oh no, please don't do that. You've left us no... Because if you actually did have a legal case against us under the Articles of Galactic Warfare, your casus belli would only extend to the forced removal of human colonies from the Juftbar system, and seeing as the only way into our colony is a long, narrow access shaft guarded by the finest soldiers in the known universe. You're going to have to summon a bombardment fleet and blast us off the planet. To do that, you're going to have to blast through 20 miles of planetary crust. Do I need to spell out for you the kind of ecological disaster that will cause for the planet? Wouldn't such wanton destruction of a conservation site be a violation of galactic law as well? Why am I asking? Here, let me quote to you the passages that prove you'd be committing a war crime. No, Galvasan shrieked. You? Fine. Keep your damn illegal colony. Not illegal. Shut it. Know this, human. You have made an enemy of the Groby this day, and we will neither forget nor forgive this transgression. Another raucous laugh shook the room. I'm supposed to fear a Groby grudge? Listen here, Snotling. Your kind doesn't know anything about grudges. You claim to have an eternal blood feud with the Urbexi, but you gave up on that after 100 years. The human race still hasn't forgiven Kathleen Kennedy for ruining Star Wars, and the cow's been dead 600 years. So you can go now. Toddle off home, get yourself labeled as the silly arse who didn't bother to read the rules before he made a claim about them. The spirit of the rules, clearly. Galvasan tried to protest, but the human was having none of it. Rules as written are all that count, you Wazak, and as written we've got you banged to rights. So go away. Look on the bright side. Your kind only live about 30 years, so it's not like anyone's going to remember your foul up for long. Well, anyone except us, obviously. You are... Oh, go dig a hole, Galvasan wailed as he fled the meeting on the verge of tears. The human took a long, satisfied puff of his pipe. Maybe I will, Groby. Maybe I will.
Stupid. That's so
When a
good.
human says whoops, you should run. No, I'm being serious. Run. When a human even whispers the word whoops, be ready for anything, I mean anything. Why, you ask? Well, let me break it down for you. When a human says whoops, two things happen. One, a small mistake and inconvenience will occur, or possibly a moderate one. But here is the thing, in the second scenario. Something or someone is going to either explode or die. Don't look at me like that, just shut up and listen. When a human says whoops, I've seen catastrophes happen, things I still can't even come to terms with after my long years out in the stars. During my time as a captain in the compact Navy, I've learned to fear the one, single, most terrifying word a human can ever utter: whoops. Once I was in the engine room making a routine inspection. I was observing a group of human engineers modifying, unsanctioned, mind you, the warp core to increase its efficiency, or so they claimed. Once they finished their modifications and started up the new warp core, I swear to all the stars in the universe, a literal goddamn spatial rift opened and proceeded to unleash a horde of monstrous tentacles upon the engine room. They were grabbing at everything and everyone. Hell, I almost got pulled into the rift myself, but luckily for me, one of the humans was able to close it in time. I will never forget the fear of certain death I experienced in that moment. And the worst part, the modifications made the warp drive an entire 15% more efficient. And in the shocked silence that followed that horrific event, the only thing that insane human of a head engineer had to say about the matter was, whoops! Another time, during a fierce battle with pirates on the Outer Rim, we were in a really bad spot, taking heavy fire and the casualties were mounting. All of us thought we were goners, but then I got a comm from one of the humans down in the weapons bay asking for permission to fire, and I quote, an experimental weapon. The mad ape had apparently been building it out of one of the decommissioned rail cannons he had. I think he called it his pet project or something. So thinking we were going to die anyways, I gave the green light to the human. I still don't know if that was the right idea to this day. And only a few seconds later, I watched as the experimental weapon shot straight through the pirate's vessel, shields and all, only to collide with the moon behind it and split it in fucking half. Stars, I was so happy to be alive that I didn't even care that half the weapons bay was reduced to molten slag in the process. Though now that I think about it, the human in question had to be quarantined in the med bay because of the sheer amount of rads he absorbed in the process. And guess what? That crazy human survived by willingly replacing half his body with cybernetics. Cybernetics. Half. Now guess what I heard from the human over the comms while we sat stunned as the moon broke apart before our eyes. Yep, you guessed it. Whoops. I have far too many stories to tell just like that, and even worse than the ones I've already shared with you today. But if I am going to leave you with anything, it's this. So listen to this old veteran's advice, will ya? When a human says whoops, something or someone is going to either explode or die. And that's why I always make sure to have at least one human on my crew. The old gods were known as the protectors of our people. When we went into space, they were myths and legends, not truly believed in by the people anymore. But there were signs the old gods were real. We saw death amongst the planets when we discovered FTL. Long-gone civilizations pounded into the dirt and made into craters. Then we found one of our own, a Gorgon, on another world, dressed in strange battle armor, impervious to our best weapons, but with a massive plasma blast hole in his chest. Panic started. How had a man from 500 years ago died in another world in impossibly advanced gear? Then we met them. Not our gods, but another species, the Taston, with the same questions as we had and the same myths as we had. The old gods, beings of unimaginable power, creatures who roamed the stars themselves and made them their servants. This was all very fanciful. Surely it was just a coincidence that two civilizations had a similar old belief. Indeed, one of these long-dead civilizations probably abducted the dead man and sent him to war. But that all changed when we found the artifact. Our dreams and myths come real, a Dyson sphere, unlimited energy, only that the star was long gone. We examined it but found we knew little. 237 unknown materials and no more than 53 unknown elements which our most powerful weapons couldn't even penetrate to find out what was under them. Surely this meant the old gods were real, an advanced civilization long since gone. We continued to explore the galaxy and found other species in a similar state of affair as us. Lots of dead civilizations and their people scattered around the stars centuries before they should have been there. Then they found the Holy Grail as far as the galaxy was concerned. A ship graveyard in the middle of deep space, filled with ships bigger than the cities all dedicated to war. Near them was a giant ring the size of a planet with a hole so massive large moons could easily fit in there without an issue. I was there when we boarded the first ship of the gods. The ship had a massive gash in it that could have easily fitted our own ship inside with room to spare. We had to nearly crawl our way through the ship's decks. The gods were small, I said to my exploration crew. Then we found a closed door, end of the line, except we saw a half-fallen panel with a lever inside. I pulled but found the door to be hard to open, but with time, the crew and I opened the door to a large room where there was plenty of headspace. There were panels off of the ground which looked like they used some sort of hologram to interface with the ship. "Are we anywhere near turning on power?" I asked into the communicator of the spacesuit. "Nearly," one of them said. "This technology is ridiculously advanced and seem to have multiple fail-safes, and here we are, power should come on now." The lights flickered into life after centuries of darkness. Holograms came on and a siren started to go off in an unknown language. The translators tried to translate the language, but all that came through at this point was, "Warning, missing section of the ship implores you reach life-saving ship, atmosphere at null." "Turn that thing off," I shouted, bathed in red light. Somewhere someone did exactly that. The red light was still going off, but he could at least hear himself think. "Sir," one of the men said, "look at the seat." He was pointing to what looked like a captain's seat. I walked over and gasped. Perfectly preserved in the void was a god. A small man with blonde hair and sagging grayed skin that must have looked so full in life. Next to one of the man's spindly hands was a blinking blue light. Slowly I moved the god's hand onto his lap and noticed he was belted in. I pressed the blue button and a message appeared that filled the front of the room. At first, a random assortment of sounds came up. It took time for the translator to start translating the words. It was a codex. Then the man came on the screen. "My name is Captain Halfthorne of the Terran Republic ship Hermes. I leave this message to the people of the Andromeda Galaxy in the hope one day they will find it, and I can answer their questions. This battle and all the other battles, all the lost worlds and battered civilizations was for you. We came through the portal you see behind us. We build wonders for your people who are already exploring the stars, Dyson spheres, terraformed planets, and ships to travel the stars with, but some wanted more. The Andromeda Alliance wanted all of our technology and us to leave this galaxy so they could rule over it, stating that our space in this galaxy was an evil that needed to be destroyed. They bombed our cities to dust and enslaved multiple species that were still in the cradle of their worlds. We protected them. Some even joined us to free their galaxy from the Alliance. The war was bitter. Casualties in the hundreds of trillions, all culminating in the battle for Portal B95. The Alliance thought that they could take Portal B95 and enslave our galaxy, the Milky Way, to enslave all the species there, too. But we fought back and destroyed the flagships of the Alliance and their governments with them. After the war, we were ashamed. We had brought innocence into our war, so we decided to leave Andromeda, satisfied we had stopped a species intent on destruction. However, the Alliance still had ships. For 18 years we had hunted them down. My ship, the last casualty of the war, freak accident with shrapnel entering my artificial heart. I only have so long now, but the Terran government gave me the honor of giving you this message. On what we call Planet Trilath, we have left database after database of our technology for you to replicate. We hope to see you one day, as free as we hoped you would be, but for now, follow the coordinates and one day, come and find us. After this, numbers came up in red, and I instantly knew treasures beyond my wildest dreams were waiting to be found. We are now masters of our galaxy. We still haven't got the portal open, and we haven't discovered the metals needed to build one in our galaxy, but we want to see our gods in the flesh, our saviors, alive and breathing, and one day we will. Whoa there, friends. No need to get all riled up on me now, the human said with both his hands raised in a placating gesture as he leaned back in his chair, attempting to distance himself from the agitated aliens and their airborne saliva. After a moment of frenzied grabbles and what was unmistakably untranslatable insults, the semi-aquatic aliens finally calmed their anger, all to the relief of the human who was now safe from the proverbial splash zone. Leaning his chair back to the ground, he flashed them with a cocky grin. What I meant was that while, plasma casters and Mac rifles are technically the superior weapons, modern body armor fucks it all up. Every goddamn cycle y'all gotta go and buy the brand new iteration of fuck-all pea shooters and tinfoil hats. And for what? So that the next asshole with the BFG 3.0 doesn't turn your fishy asses into sashimi? And that's all 'cause your brand spanking new body armor system 2.0, which you spent half your hard-earned credits on last cycle, is now obsolete to the new 3.0 model. The human was clearly bitter about something as he threw back the rest of the dark brown ethanol which he had been slowly sipping till now. Letting the synthetic crystal cup smack back down onto the table as he breathed out a deep, satisfied sigh that caused the three aliens to flinch back from the harsh sting of the airborne ethanol. The human looked back to the three aliens from behind the wide brim of his hat, sighing again as he poured himself another glass with a scuffed and dented silver flask he produced from his coat. Look, I'm not saying you Westnecks don't make good weapon tech. Y'all really do produce some damn fine gear, genuine technological marvels, real sci-fi space magic shit. I'm just saying we humans got one thing figured out that y'all don't. At least from what I've seen out here, and trust me, I've been around. I'd bet you that I could still smoke any jackass who's thinking they're hot shit because they wearing one of them fancy-ass flex fiber, nano armor stuff y'all so proud of. The human sat back after stowing away his flask in the large overcoat he was wearing, crossing his arms as he sipped from the glass once again. Ha! And what would a human know about advanced weaponry? We Westnecks have been the galaxy's leaders in advanced warfare technology since before your kind even left your home system. So human, enlighten us on what you primitives have so-called figured out. The largest of the three Westnecks taunted in his gurgle-sounding voice, more saliva being spit across the table as they all laughed at the human. The human in turn simply sat causally with his arm extended away from the table to save his drink from any unwanted mixers falling in. "Well," he said with a smirk, "if you really want to know..." Pushing his long coat to the side, the human reached below the table and produced a large metal object that made a hefty thud as it was placed on the table before them. "What in deep reefs is this supposed to be?" one of them asked, as the human's smirk widened into a massive shit-eating grin. "Why, gentlemen, this you see before you is a one-of-a-kind, customized Smith & Wesson 2153 double-action revolver, sitting at an impressive 2.5 pounds of modern, ultra-lightweight stainless Martian alloy with a beautiful 6-inch barrel." The human picked up the weapon and removed a large cylinder of what was clearly some sort of primitive ammunition. "But this is what really makes her special. A .500 S&W 700 grain armor-piercing, depleted uranium bullet all wrapped up nicely in this here nano-forged cartridge. And it doesn't stop there." The human loaded the cartridge back into the massive gun, snapping the cylinder closed with the flick of his wrist. Being the crazy, deadly beauty that she is, she also sports a micro-inertial compensation generator field all housed neatly in the grip, meaning this can of ass-whooping shoots like a low-cal pistol, which translates to, "I shoot pretty damn fast and straight with this, baby." The human finished his presentation and slid his piece back into the holster at his hip, still grinning at the three silent aliens. At least they were silent for about 3 seconds before they burst into roaring laughter at the human's expense once again. Hughes was now very clearly unamused and disappointed at their reaction as their saliva hit his face. "A powder-based gun!" it scoffed. "Did you seriously just claim that a primitive and useless thing like that can do anything to our advanced tech? Oh, you poor, stupid primitive. If your kind truly believes that, then I don't think any sane species will vote to let you into the Federation Council. In fact, I don't think they would anyways." Their gurgling laughter roared even louder as the human whipped the spit off his face, making sure to place a hand over the top of his drink. After a few long moments, the three aliens calmed back down, and the human spoke once again. "Laugh all you want, but your body armor tech is made with nanofibers to absorb and dissipate heat from plasma-based weapons, not kinetic impacts. And the personal shields are only calibrated against Mac rifle rounds that are moving at ridiculous speeds, nothing quite like what I got here," the human said, patting his holster and shrugging. The largest Westnecks laughed again. "You honestly think that, don't you?" The alien was cut off as the door burst open, and the hulking frame of a Ferraris came charging in, knocking down a terrified bystander in the process. "Move aside, whelp, before I rip you to shreds!" it snarled. The human leaned back into his chair, pulling the brim of his hat back over his eyes as he silently watched the massive alien make its way towards the bar, not failing to notice the all-too-familiar trophies hanging from its neck. The crowd parting in fear of incurring the wrath of the galaxy's strongest and most brutal species, who also happened to be wearing the latest full-body nanofiber combat armor, a truly terrifying sight to most species. Most. As the Ferraris passed his table, the lone human shifted his seat into the path of the beast at the last second, causing the human to spill his drink onto the leg of the Ferraris. "Oops," the human said as he stood. "Sorry there, bud. Didn't mean..." His voice was cut off as the Ferraris' claws gripped around the human's neck, causing his hat to fall to the ground. "You sub-sapient creature, you dare? I've fought and killed countless of your miserable kind before. What's stopping me from ripping your throat out?" It boomed. "Let me hear you beg for your life, and maybe I'll grant you a quick death," the beast said, leaning down to flash his massive, razor-sharp teeth in the human's face. An audible click rang out in the deafening silence as the human looked up into the eyes of the monster and grinned. "Are those level 4 plates?" he asked. "What?" The Ferraris was cut off as a boom echoed through the confines of the small bar, causing many of the more sound-sensitive species to cover their ears and cry out in pain. Razor-sharp claws released from the human's throat as the Ferraris staggered backward, gasping as green blood spilled to the floor from a gaping hole in its stomach. Impossible! It cried in pain and sheer disbelief. How could a human? How? It bellowed before coughing up blood and falling to its knees, now looking up at the small human as he casually picked his hat up off the ground and looked down on the beast. Countless, huh? The human said as he leveled his six-shooter at the Ferrari's head. Seems you never fought an American before, have you, shitbird? Another boom thundered through the bar as the back half of the Ferrari's head disappeared, gore erupting outwards like a volcano. And in the ringing silence that followed, the human looked around at the terrified patrons all staring at him, flashing a toothy grin at the three Westnecks still frozen at the table, all of them going noticeably pale at his cool gaze. Holstering his weapon, he reached into his coat for a device that everyone in the bar instantly recognized as a bounty puck, all remaining perfectly still as he bent down and scanned the dead Ferrari's pirate, an audible bing sounding as the puck flashed green. Stowing the bounty puck back into his jacket pocket, the human tossed a handful of credits onto the table before walking out the door without a single word. Shell-shocked patrons stared as the doors closed behind him. The silence was only broken when someone blurted out, "What the fuck is an American?" Life as a weapons inspector is difficult. From the countless deaths under strange circumstances, political pressure, bribes, and death threats. It's no surprise that of all the jobs in the galaxy, being an inspector is among the highest paying and most dangerous. Yet, to Ragnar Thronton, it was the most enthralling occupation available. For 200 years, he has been a weapons inspector for the Galactic Compact. Not only does he enjoy the work, but also the connections it brings him. Throughout his career, he has diligently watched the many species of the galaxy and ensured compliance with the law. Today, the old inspector would be visiting a species whose name is infamous among weapons inspectors across the galaxy, the humans. These humans were not infamous for suspect deaths, bribery, corruption, or danger, but the incredible ability to create incomprehensibly potent superweapons not covered by galactic law. Every year, their scientists and engineers come up with mind-bogglingly insane blueprints and prototypes for weapons that could annihilate entire star clusters. Ragnar was ready for a very long day. As he got out of bed, he stretched his arms, walked to his bathroom, took a shower, cleaned his mandibles, and put on his most ceremonious clothes. His species, the Radikar, had very similar physiology to the humans. Due to this, it was more often than not his duty to inspect human shipyards and battle fleets. Today, however, he expected no conflict. He was to inspect the shipyards of the Terran government in orbit around Earth. This one shipyard produced more galactic laws than most governments ever would. With every inspection, a new superweapon would be found nestled in a loophole more complicated than the last. Ragnar took one last inventory of his belongings, then exited his hotel room, took an elevator to the lobby, exited the building, and entered a black car waiting for him outside. The car took him to the Cape Canaveral space elevator, where he boarded elevator 1A and began his 10-minute journey to space. From there, a shuttle took him directly to the massive station where his day's work lay. "Welcome back, Ragnar. Always nice to see you, though I'm afraid your visit will be unnecessary," said Fleet Admiral Green with a smirk. "This station no longer manufactures any weapons." "Oh, come on, Green. For the 120 years I've known you, you've never stopped making guns. Take me to the testing grounds." "We don't make weapons anymore, so there are no testing grounds. But we do have restaurants, and we do make a mean burger." "Maybe after you show me whatever it is you are making," replied Ragnar with a smile. "After all, if they aren't weapons, you don't mind me taking a look." "Certainly. Follow me." The Admiral turned and began to walk down the large corridor to the testing room. "If I may ask, Admiral, what exactly are you making here?" Green hesitated for a moment, obviously trying to remember the exact terminology used by his engineers before replying, "Singularity waste heat disposers. As of last week, all human ships now operate on Kugelblitz energy generators." "Singularity as in black hole?" "Yes, but artificial, completely harmless as long as you don't touch it." Green began to chuckle at his statement, seemingly amusing himself with his clear disregard for safety. "I don't find that funny. Touching a black hole would result in a horribly painful death. The Admiral didn't seem to care about Ragnar pointing out the inherent danger, only chuckling harder before finally regaining his composure. The two walked in silence for multiple minutes before finally reaching a large blast door. The Admiral placed his hand on a scanner, to which the door began to whine and open. "After you," Green said. As Ragnar walked through the door, he was struck by the absolute size of the complex. It was well over 10 miles long and 4 miles wide. All throughout the complex, engineers worked on massive devices that looked similar to the magnetic accelerators common on human ships. "I thought you weren't making weapons anymore." "We aren't. Those are, singularity waste heat disposers, as I told you earlier." "Why do they look like your spinal mount weapons then?" "Because we need to get the heat out of the singularity containment field quickly." "How quickly?" "About 99% the speed of light. These babies heat up quickly, and we can't have that." "What? 99%? "Yes. How is that not a weapon?" "Because it isn't designed as one." "How destructive is it?" "I'll show you. Hey, Jenkins, get a test ready and lower the radiation shielding." A man on a control platform gave the Admiral a thumbs up and pressed a couple of buttons on his station. "All personnel leave the work floor. Live testing commencing soon." The thousands of workers along the floor began to run away from the area, each one entering a separate compartment shielded by a meter of lead. A massive blast door began to close in front of Ragnar and Green, and the two of them were handed protective goggles by a young scientist. After 30 seconds, the blast door fully closed, and the two of them moved to a small viewing port in the door. "Jenkins, drop the, heat absorber, then start it up." "Yes, sir." Warning lights began to flash as a standard military cruiser was lowered in front of the heat disposer. Once it was fully lowered, the Admiral got a giddy look of anticipation on his face before yelling, "Do it!" An absurdly bright beam of energy shot out of the magnetic accelerator. It smashed into the fully operational shield of the cruiser. Within a fraction of a second, the shield shattered, and the beam continued on its journey. It ripped through the armor plating of the cruiser. A horrific screeching noise was heard, and within half a second, the beam pierced straight through the other side of the cruiser. It smashed into a shield protecting the rest of the station, and it began to flicker. "Shut it down!" screamed the Admiral before the beam began to weaken and eventually dissipate. Ragnar was horrified. "Green, what the hell was that?" "A heat disposer. It just gutted a military cruiser from bow to stern, then went out the other side and just about destroyed the whole station, all in less than a second. Did it?" "Yes." "I must have blinked." Green yawned. "Anyways, we've already outfitted all our ships with this revolutionary new energy device. I'll make sure to tell our boys in uniform to be careful of the exhaust port." "You what?" "What's the worst species in the galaxy?" "Sentient species, I mean, that you've had to deal with." "There's a lot of spacers